Chapter 1170. Long Fei-yi and Gu Beiwei were both standing by the door, but Han Yunxi and Lil Thing didn't notice. Both of them were still glaring at each other. Abruptly, Han Yunxi rose to her feet and pointed at Lil Thing. "Alright, Lil Thing. You still don't think you're in the wrong, do you?" Lil Thing didn't understand Mama Yunxi's words, but it could guess that she was still blaming it for bullying fourth young Miss Ren. Actually, it hadn't really bullied or even touched fourth young Miss Ren. At most, it had threatened her. It might be obedient to Mama Yunxi on other matters, but it didn't want to back down on this one. It wanted Mama Yunxi to know that it didn't like fourth young Miss Ren and didn't want her to have any thoughts about the gentleman. Lil Thing rested its paws on the table as it leaned forward and squeaked at Han Yunxi in a huff. "All right. It's only been a while, but you've grown bolder. Are you rebelling now?" Han Yunxi asked. Squeak. Lil Thing squeaked again with all its might. "I'll give you one last chance to admit your wrongs. Do you admit it or not?" Han Yunxi said, before adding, "I'm telling you now, the consequences of not admitting it will be severe." Lil Thing could hear the warning in Mama Yunxi's voice, but it didn't know what she was warning it about. It stood up and stared doubtfully at Han Yunxi. Seeing this, Han Yunxi grew doubtful as well. Did Lil Thing understand what she meant? Han Yunxi thought it over before rolling up her sleeves to reveal the priceless white jade crystal bracelet on her wrist. She clenched one hand into a fist while stroking the bracelet with the other as she stared coldly at Lil Thing. As Lil Thing stared and stared, its fur began to curl up. Without a doubt, Lil Thing understood Han Yunxi's meaning. What does she mean by that? Long Fei-yi didn't understand. As soon as he said this, Han Yunxi and Lil Thing turned their heads in unison. As soon as it saw Long Fei-yi, Lil Thing immediately flew to the roof, its snow-white fur puffed up into a ball. After knowing the truth about the lustbite power, the little thing was even more afraid of Long Fei-yi. As for the matter of the Long Fei-yi hugging it, it didn't even know that it was a hug. It only knew that it was bumped into. "The princess is warning the little thing in the name of your highness." Gu Beiwei walked in with a smile. Long Fei-yi glanced at the ceiling beam but did not take it to heart. He asked indifferently, "Have you packed everything?" "I told Mingxiang to put them away. You can leave at any time." "Where's seventh young master?" Han Yunxi asked. "Don't worry about him." Long Fei-yi's attitude was still cold, hiding it perfectly. "Are we leaving now?" Han Yunxi murmured. She didn't feel anything when she said she was leaving, but when it was time to leave, she suddenly realized that she couldn't bear to part with Gu Beiwei. If you're tired, then rest for a while. If you're not tired, then get ready to leave," Long Fei-yi said indifferently. Gu Beiwei was standing at the side, looking up at Lil Thing and waving at it. Lil Thing couldn't wait to pounce into the young master's embrace. In the past, it always hid in the young master's embrace and avoided Papa Long. But now, it couldn't bear to do so because it knew that the young master's chest was still injured. It was the 4 scratches left behind by its claws. "What's wrong with Lil Thing?" Gu Beiwei smiled helplessly. Lil Thing could be infatuated with the young master's smile for an entire day. It was really warm and beautiful, like spring returning to the earth. The sun poured down and flowers bloomed everywhere. Han Yunxi immediately told him about how Lil Thing went to bully fourth young Miss Ren. "What do you think is wrong with it?" Han Yunxi asked helplessly. Long Fei-yi wasn't interested at all. He had already packed his things at the desk. He only allowed Han Yunxi to pack his things. Han Yunxi was pregnant, so he had already asked her not to touch his things. Gu Beiwei was very patient with Lil Thing. He smiled faintly and hooked his finger at Lil Thing again. This was the second time he hooked his finger. Lil Thing couldn't take it anymore. It immediately flew down, but it didn't dare to pounce into the young master's embrace. Instead, it landed on his shoulder, ran along his arm, and sat on his hand. Han Yunxi said helplessly, "You should communicate with it properly. It has to stay. If you don't educate it well, it might go and harass fourth young Miss Ren every day." Lil Thing also ate the wild fruit and was immortal. If Lil Thing stayed, it could help Gu Beiyue and Gu. Just like before, Gu Beiyue used his index finger to tease Lil Thing's ears and tail. Lil Thing knew that Mama Yunxi had told on it, so it sat there obediently, not daring to move. It was waiting for the young master to question it. Unexpectedly, the young master didn't ask a thing, as if he didn't care at all. All he did was smile and play with it. At first, Lil Thing was apprehensive, but gradually it relaxed under the young master's warm smile. Han Yunxi looked at them doubtfully and asked, "Gu Beiyue, is this how you communicate with it?" Gu Beiyue said, "Maybe Lil Thing doesn't like fourth young Miss Ren. I'll tell the servants to tell fourth young Miss Ren to come less often. But fourth young Miss Ren is your right-hand woman." Han Yunxi reminded him immediately. Although she was Lil Thing's master, she couldn't let Gu Beiyue spoil Lil Thing so much. "It doesn't matter. If she needs help, she can find Vice Academy head Shen. He's better at handling matters than her," Gu Beiyue said. "The Rin clan will marry her off in the end." Han Yunxi wasn't very clear on Medical City's power, but she could pick up the meaning behind Gu Beiyue's words. Fourth young Miss Ren was a friend worth making and using, but the Rin clan behind her was the second most powerful clan in Medical City. Because of Gu Yuntian, the Gu clan had fallen to ruin and the Rin clan had taken first place. "Whatever you say," Han Yunxi said helplessly. "But Lil Thing can't dislike people for no reason. There must be a reason. How about you ask it after it recovers?" Gu Beiyue asked with a smile. "You didn't hurt fourth young Miss Ren, did you?" "That's not the case, but it scared them," Han Yunxi said honestly. "Then that's good. I'll keep an eye out in the future and make sure it doesn't run off. I'll apologize to her later," Gu Beiyue intoned. Anyone who didn't know better would assume Lil Thing was Gu Beiyue's pet instead of Han Yunxi's. Lil Thing had no idea what they were talking about, but it knew the gentleman wasn't angry. It was hard to see someone with such a good temper get angry in this lifetime. Gu Beiyue and Han Yunxi sat and chatted for a while before Chu Shifeng arrived. "Your Highness, Princess, the carriage is waiting at the back door. You can leave at any time." Long Feiyi had finished packing his things as well. He didn't say much, but told Gu Beiyue, "No need to see me off. Those blood samples spoil easily, so you should hurry back to the study. There's no need to see me off. If there's any news, have Su Donglin write a letter immediately," Han Yunxi said seriously. "Have a safe journey." Gu Beiyue didn't say much, but clasped his hands respectfully in front of his chest. He secretly said in his heart, "Princess, I hope this subordinate can give you good news before the little master is born." There were only 4 more months until the little master was born. Judging from the condition of Gu's arm, there wasn't much hope left if he couldn't be cured within 4 months. Han Yunxi had no idea of Gu Beiyue's sorrow. She hugged Lil Thing and didn't forget to lecture it. "Be good and listen to me. Don't think you can do whatever you want just because Gu Beiyue dotes on you. When I come back, if someone tells on you to me again." Han Yunxi narrowed her eyes and scooted closer to Lil Thing. "I'll stuff you into Long Feiyi's sleeves." Lil Thing looked confused. It didn't understand, but when it saw Han Yunxi's evil smile, it nodded vigorously. Gu Beiyue really didn't send them off. After they left, he carried Lil Thing and walked quickly to the study. Time was very tight. As for Gu, no one mentioned him. For hours after Han Yunxi and Long Feiyi set off, Gu caught up with them on horseback. It was lunchtime. Gu was carrying a big bag on his back and carrying a huge food basket in his hand. Not to mention Han Yunxi, even the coachman and the shadow guard were very happy to see him. Because with this fellow here, they didn't have to eat dry rations anymore. They also didn't have to work so hard to make hot food for the princess. Gu took out a small box from the food basket and handed it to Han Yunxi. He smiled and said, "Here." Long Feiyi snatched the box and opened it up to see 4 dishes and a soup. The meat and vegetables were a perfect match and looked, smelled, and tasted good. There were 2 servings in total, and 2 bowls and chopsticks had been prepared as well. Han Yunxi wasn't hungry at first, but the sight of the food immediately stirred her appetite. She didn't stand on ceremony with Gu and dug in. "What are you looking at? The other portion is for you. I'll come back after I'm full." "I'll eat when I'm full," Gu said as he handed the big food basket to Chu Shifeng. "Divide it among the brothers." Chu Shifeng was surprised as well. When did Gu become so generous? In the past, he'd never brought food for the princess, but no one else. "Our paths are different. This is the only meal, no more next time. I won't poison you guys to death," Gu said with a chuckle. "I'm not afraid of your poison," Chu Shifeng said as he took the basket. As Long Fei ate, he glanced at Gu Chishao's back with a complicated expression. After the meal, they rested for a while before setting out again. Just like the last time the 4 of them were together, Gu Chishao was still riding in front of them. While Han Yunxi was sleeping, Long Feiyi silently got off the carriage. He mounted Chu Shifeng's horse and chased after Gu. Gu Chishao seemed to know that Long Fei would chase after him, because he gradually slowed down until he stopped. As soon as Long Feiyi arrived, he got straight to the point. "Hey, and you don't understand, so don't meddle in other people's business." Gu turned to look at him with the same annoying grin. "Do you believe that this crown prince won't cut off your hand?" Long Feiyi asked in a low voice. If this was the past, Gu would have been smug, but now Long Feiyi really had the skills. He glanced back and saw that the carriage was still behind them before rolling up his sleeves to reveal his arm. As soon as he saw Gu's arm, Long Feiyi sucked in a cold breath. This was more serious than he imagined. He saw. Chapter 1171. From Gu's wrist all the way up to his arm, his flesh, meridians, and bones had all turned into plants, becoming vines that intertwined like fried dough twists. Moreover, Long Feiyi could clearly see that the vines were spreading towards Gu's palm. "When did it start?" Long Feiyi asked in a low voice. "After we left the mountain that day, it became like this overnight." Gu finally stopped smiling. "Did you plant seeds?" Long Feiyi asked again. "No, not even a single seed. Poison Lass's hypothesis is correct, they should be growing from blood." Gu answered. "They are eating away at your flesh." Long Feiyi said seriously. Gu raised his hand, looked at it, and smiled. "Yes. I think this hand will be eaten by tomorrow morning. Let me walk with you for a while more, I'll leave when Poison Lass wakes up. It won't be good for her to see this. I'll chop off this hand for you," Long Feiyi said. However, Gu revealed his other hand, and the inner part of his upper arm had been taken over by the vines. So what if he chopped off 2 hands? Blood flowed all over his body, and vines could grow out of his flesh at any time, eating away at his flesh and bones bit by bit. All over his body, there were patches here and there. When these vines spread out, they would quickly merge into one and take over his entire body. Gu looked at Long Feiyi, and was especially serious. "Long Feiyi, if one day my head is eaten away and turns into a strange tree, chop me up. Tell Poison Lass, and Ling Er. Tell them that I've gone to the ends of the world, to the mysterious continent. I can't do that. Long Fei Yi said. Goose suddenly laughed happily. Don't blame me for not reminding you. If you don't help me lie, Poison Lass will definitely cry for me. She might even cry until she goes blind. Ha! Long Fei Yi pulled his reins and helped him turn the horse around. He said coldly, go back to Medical City now. If you really can't save yourself, I'll tell Mu Linger the truth. I'll let her hug a tree and cry every day. I'll annoy you to death. Gu turned back to look at him. For some reason, his smiling eyes suddenly looked a little sad. He said faintly, Long Fei Yi, if I turn into a tree, will I still have consciousness? Can I still hear you? Do you think my body will be covered in flowers? When he was very, very young, when he was still Shao Qi, he had a father who loved him very much. The first time he left the wooden hut, he ran all over the poison sect's forbidden grounds. When he saw a flowering tree, he ran back. He sat in front of the wooden hut for an entire day, waiting for his father to come back. He said excitedly to his father, Father, Qi wants to be a tree and be covered in flowers. He saw a bird flying high in the sky. When his father came back at night, he would say, Father, Qi wants to be a bird and fly to the other side of the mountain. Later, he saw the 4 seasons of the mountains. Flowers bloomed in spring, insects sang in summer, leaves fell in autumn, and snow flew in winter. He saw that all the plants in the mountains had withered and died in winter. He sat there waiting for his father to come back. He said sadly, Father, will Qi wither and die one day? Those carefree days were the ones he remembered the deepest. He could still clearly remember how Gu Yuntian had answered him. Gu Yuntian said, if you wither and die, you'll come back to life once the winter is over and spring comes. Gu's eyes actually glistened with tears. He said, Long Fei Yi, let me stay a little longer. Just until daybreak. Maybe we'll never see each other again. Long Fei Yi turned his head away, refusing to look at him. However, he didn't chase him away. Just like that, the 2 men rode side by side at the front of the caravan on their respective horses. The shadow guard behind them was very surprised. From afar, His Highness seemed to be chatting with Gu, but that didn't seem to be the case. No one dared to go near them. No one knew if Long Fei Yi and Gu were silent or chatting the entire way. How long was a night? Gu looked at the brightening sky in the east and hid his left hand, which had turned into a vine. He turned his horse around and was about to leave when Long Fei Yi dismounted. You're not going to say goodbye? No, Poison Girl looks better when she eats than when she sleeps. I'll always remember the way she eats. Gu laughed heartily. He didn't linger, but whipped his horse into a gallop. Long Fei Yi watched his retreating form until it vanished from sight. Then he turned back to look at the eastern skies. The sky really was bright. Chu Shifeng and the rest were all astonished. Wasn't Gu going to Medicine Ghost Valley? He should have gone south to Medicine Ghost Valley, but he hadn't even reached the intersection yet. Why had he left? And why had he gone back? Long Fei Yi only said, Gu's turned into Medicine Ghost Valley. Everyone immediately withdrew their thoughts, not daring to make any more guesses, much less mention them. Long Fei Yi didn't return to his carriage, but rode his horse in front to lead the way. He hadn't slept all night, so his eyes were heavy and silent. They were so dark that even the light of the rising sun couldn't penetrate them. Han Yunxi was still sleeping peacefully in the carriage under the cover of the first rays of the sun. Gu Qishao would never know that the way she slept was much prettier than the way she ate. Currently, Gu Beiyue was sitting on the roof of the tallest building in the medical academy, holding Lil Thing as he stared at the road leading into the city. He was waiting for Gu. He knew he'd come back this morning, and that he had no choice but to do so. He was very quiet, but Lil Thing could clearly sense his emotions. He was very sad. Lil Thing endured at first, but as the gentleman's grief grew stronger, it began to feel uneasy. After all, the princess was always calm and collected in the face of even the most important things. It had only found out today that young master could be sad as well. Lil Thing struggled out of Gu Beiyue's arms and stood on his shoulder, squeaking a few times. Gu Beiyue turned to look at him. Despite his bad mood, he was still gentle to Lil Thing. "Lil Thing, what's wrong?" he asked softly. Lil Thing squeaked and gestured with its hands. Gu Beiyue controlled his temper and looked at it seriously. "Lil Thing, you can tell that I'm sad," he asked gently. Lil Thing didn't know what the gentleman was talking about, but it knew that the gentleman must be guessing what it meant. It knew that the gentleman would guess correctly. It immediately nodded. "You know me the best." Gu Beiyue smiled faintly and leaned closer. Lil Thing carefully hugged his face and gently stroked it, hoping to give the gentleman some comfort. It was so small that it couldn't even lend a shoulder to the gentleman. It didn't know how much comfort it could give. However, the gentleman closed his eyes and allowed it to stroke his cheek. In such a big medical city with such a high roof, Gu Beiyue sat there alone, leaning his face gently on Lil Thing. What a lonely figure it was in the early morning sun. Gu Beiyue waited for a long time. It was close to noon when Gu returned. He stood up and looked down at the smear of red outside the medical academy. "Shao Qi, no matter what, I'll do my best to save you," he swore to himself. Gu's figure entered the gates of the medical academy. Gu Beiyue flew down from the sky. As soon as he landed, he was as gentle, modest, and indifferent as usual. Just as he reached the study, a medical assistant came over. "Dean, 4th young Miss Ren and Vice Academy Head Shin request an audience. Tell them that they can make the decision if there's anything. If it's not a matter of life and death, don't come over for the next few months." Gu Beiyue instructed indifferently. Just as the medical assistant was about to leave, he added, "Oh right, apologize to 4th young Miss Ren on my behalf. Tell her that Lil Thing won't look for her again. Tell her not to worry." With that, he entered the study. Lil Thing knew the young master was busy and didn't dare disturb him. It obediently jumped off his shoulder and scurried to the roof to nest. When the medical assistant passed on Gu Beiyue's words to 4th young Miss Ren, her originally spirited eyes immediately dimmed. She muttered, "That's strange. The princess has already apologized, so why is Dean Beiyue apologizing?" Vice Academy Head Shin didn't understand. "4th young Miss Ren, what did that poison beast do to you?" "Nothing, it was just a joke." 4th young Miss Ren hurriedly explained. Vice Academy Head Shin didn't ask any more questions. The two of them left Gu Beiyue's courtyard together. Vice Academy Head Shin whispered, 4th young Miss Ren, have you heard?" "What is it?" 4th young Miss Ren was curious. There was a lot of gossip in the medical academy, but Vice Academy Head Shin never gossiped. "I heard that a few days ago, the dean asked someone to matchmake with the Qin family in the southern part of the city." Vice Academy Head Shin lowered his voice. "What?" 4th young Miss Ren cried out in alarm. "Shoo, keep your voice down," Vice Academy Head Shin said unhappily. If it wasn't for Dean Beiyue's gossip, he wouldn't have paid attention to it at all. "When did this happen? Why didn't I know?" 4th young Miss Ren was very nervous. "A few days ago. Quite a few people in the academy found out." Vice Academy Head Shin smiled. Could it be that she'd been so focused on the little thing that she hadn't paid attention to it? Fourth young Miss Wren asked anxiously, the Chin family in the southern part of the city. The one that's ranked second in Medical City. Yes, that's the Chin family. Vice Academy head Shin nodded seriously. The Chin family in Medical City was a family that produced talented people. If fourth young Miss Wren hadn't been favored by Dean Baiyue, perhaps the Chin family would have become Medical City's #1 family after the Gu family fell. Which young miss of the Chin family does he like? Fourth young Miss Wren tried her best to hold back her sobs. I don't know if this information is accurate, but I heard it's the Chin family's eldest young miss. Vice Academy head Shin was very helpless. Fourth young Miss Wren felt like she'd been struck by lightning. She was completely stunned. The eldest young miss of the Chin family was a cripple. Her legs were atrophied, and she spent most of her time in a wheelchair. She was publicly known as an old maid in Medical City. No one was willing to marry her. Dean Baiyue had never interacted with her, so how did he fall for her? I don't believe it. Fourth young Miss Wren said stubbornly. Old man doesn't believe it either. I don't know if it's true or not. There's been no movement from the Chin family, and Dean Baiyue is so busy. Even if it's true, there probably won't be any news in the near future. Vice Academy head Shin sighed helplessly. Regardless of whether it was true or not, Gu Baiyue really wouldn't have time to worry about his marriage for the next few months. As soon as Gu returned, Gu Baiyue became busy. Chapter 1172. Gu Baiyue and Gu Qishao busied themselves day and night in Medical City, searching for medicine and conducting experiments. Su Donglin sent letters to Long Feiyi almost every day to tell him the truth. Every 3 or 4 days, he sent a letter to Han Yunxi with good news. Han Yunxi was in a good mood. Every time she read Su Donglin's letters about finding medicine again, she'd happily tell Long Feiyi about it. Long Feiyi saw that she was so happy that he didn't dare to tell her the truth. If this was the past, he wouldn't hide the truth, but Han Yunxi was pregnant now, so he had to be cautious. Because they paid close attention to what they ate on the road, it took them half a month to reach the army camp. The army struggling within Tianning's borders was the Bailey Army, Long Feiyi's largest force. It was led by the Bailey clan, who incorporated small armies from Tianning, the south-central regions, and even Tiannan. Because of the Bailey clan's leadership, this army was still called the Bailey Army. Aside from this army, the Bailey clan also controlled Cloud Realm Continent's only navy. It had to be said that currently, the strongest military force in all of Cloud Realm Continent was Long Fei's Bailey Army. Currently, the Bailey Navy was stationed in the North Sea, on the eastern shores of Northernly. As long as Long Feiyi gave the order, the Bailey Navy could continue north to attack Northernly and cooperate with Ningqing to take over Northernly. However, Long Feiyi and Ningqing had an agreement, so the Bailey Navy had already been stationed at the harbor for months. Because of this, Bailey Yuanlong had plenty of complaints. As for the land forces, the Bailey Army had absorbed the small armies from the 3 regions and stationed their main camp in the outskirts of Tianning Central Region, Yuning Prefecture. Here, they could reach the western battlefields in the west, intimidate Tiannan in the east, and take only half a month's journey to the 3-way battlefield in the north. South, they could use the official roads to reach Cloud Realm Continent's 3 granaries. Of course, this wasn't Bailey Yuanlong's choice, but Long Feiyi's. Long Feiyi and Han Yunxi's carriage had yet to reach the army camp when Bailey Yuanlong received news. Immediately, he ordered a dozen deputy generals and a few of his sons to line the streets to greet them. He had a lot of things to discuss with His Highness when he came back. He thought that by welcoming him here, he could talk with His Highness all the way back. Unexpectedly, His Highness did not get off the carriage, nor did he go to the army. Instead, he took a small path around the Yuning army camp and went to a newly built tent behind the Yuning army camp. Bailey Yuanlong had ordered his men to set up this tent half a month ago. It was behind Yuning's barracks and was called the rear camp. It was only separated from Yuning's barracks by a small road. However, its defenses were much stricter than Yuning's. Only the shadow guard stood guard here, not a single ordinary soldier. It wasn't as simple and crude as an ordinary military camp. Granny Zhao had personally picked out the beds, blankets, and other necessities in the camp. Moreover, it had a special kitchen and storehouse. Bailey Yuanlong stared at the departing carriage with a doubtful expression. "Father, what does His Highness mean by this?" Bailey Qiyu asked in a low voice. Bailey Yuanlong murmured back, "The Western Qin princess is pregnant." Bailey Qiyu gasped, "She..." Before he could speak, Bailey Yuanlong glared at him, silencing him obediently. "This is a serious matter. His Highness hasn't made it public yet. If word gets out of your mouth, be careful of your head." Bailey Yuanlong rebuked. His Highness having an heir was already a huge matter. It was related to the East Qin imperial lineage and the succession to the throne in the future. Now that Han Yunxi, the Western Qin princess, was pregnant with His Highness's heir, the matter was even more serious. Bailey Yuanlong himself might not be able to see through the complicated relationship, so he naturally wouldn't discuss it with his son so early. This child understands. Bailey Qiyu was terrified. Although he couldn't see through it, he knew how complicated the matter was. He whispered, "So this rear camp is for the princess to nurture her pregnancy." Actually, His Highness didn't live a luxurious life, but he still paid attention to his food and clothing. He never made do with what he had. Even if Han Yunxi wasn't pregnant, it wouldn't be strange for His Highness to live in the rear camp. What Bailey Yuanlong didn't understand was why His Highness didn't go to the main camp first, but instead went straight to the rear camp. "Father, should we follow or go back?" Bailey Qiyu asked. This was the very question Bailey Yuanlong was hesitant about. This was because he didn't know if His Highness would go to the main camp to meet the soldiers after settling down in the rear camp. If His Highness was going to the main camp later, then it'd be unnecessary for them to follow him there. With so many men rushing over, they'd definitely disturb the peace of the camp and make His Highness unhappy. If His Highness didn't go to the main camp later and they didn't follow him to the rear camp, then it'd be difficult for the soldiers to see His Highness. If news of his men failing to see His Highness spread, wouldn't the Bailey army, with his immense power and influence, become a laughingstock to the rest of the world? What should I do? Bailey Yuanlong hesitated again and again before he gradually realized something. That master was no longer just him, but the master of the Bailey army. Soon enough, he'd become the master of all of Cloud Realm continent. It was much more difficult to figure out his thoughts than before. Father and son hesitated again and again before deciding to return to the main camp. After all, they didn't want to follow His Highness and be cursed out in front of the soldiers before returning with their tails between their legs. The carriage slowly entered the camp. After Long Fei Yi got off, he personally helped Han Yunxi down. Although fourth young Miss Ren had said that the fetus was most stable in the 5th or 6th trimester, it was still permissible to make any big movements. However, Long Fei Yi was a cautious man who wouldn't allow any accidents to happen. If this was the past, he would have carried Han Yunxi straight off the carriage, but he didn't even dare to do so now. Han Yunxi stroked her belly and laughed to herself. This little fellow had basically become her talisman of possession. Even Long Fei Yi didn't dare to bully him. Han Yunxi had barely steadied herself when a familiar figure barged into her vision. She hadn't even taken a good look at the camp she'd be living in for the next few months. "Princess. Princess, this old servant missed you." Granny Zhao dashed out of a small tent at the side. She was already so old, but she was still able to run as if she was flying. Her movements were nimble. If not for Long Fei Ye's presence, she might have thrown herself into Han Yunqi's arms. She was very happy to see the princess. Now that she saw the princess pregnant with her son, she felt like her lifelong wish had come true. Although Zhao Mama had flown over, she still stopped in front of Han Yunqi and bowed respectfully. "May your highness be blessed. May the princess be blessed." Her gaze never left Han Yunqi's stomach as she added, "May the little mistress be blessed." Han Yunqi didn't know whether to laugh or cry, but Long Fei Yi was expressionless. "You've finished preparing for noon." Zhao Mama straightened her horse and said seriously, "To report to your highness, Chu Shifeng sent a group of people over." This old servant took advantage of the time to prepare. "The food just came out of the oven and there's an old hen stew." An old hen. An old hen again. "Zhao Mama, why don't you open a chain of old hen stew restaurants instead?" Han Yunqi's face turned black. She really wanted to knock herself unconscious, but she stopped Zhao Mama. "I'm not hungry right now, it's just that my back hurts. Let's go inside and lie down for a bit. Princess must be tired from the long journey." "The rooms have all been tidied up, please come in," Zhao Mama said hastily. Inside, Han Yunqi saw 10 servant girls and 2 female physicians waiting for her. Before Long Fei Yi could speak, Zhao Mama rushed to introduce them. "Princess, these 2 female physicians were personally chosen by 4th young Miss Ren. This old servant has already made arrangements. In 2 months, when the child is 8 months old, I'll send for 4th young Miss Ren and a few experienced midwives from Medical City." Han Yunqi didn't speak. Zhao Mama must have arranged things like this because Long Fei Yi had given his approval. She stroked her belly and sighed in her heart. The child in her belly was simply a little emperor. There were so many people waiting on him with such high standards. However, when she thought about it seriously, she suddenly realized that if she gave birth to a boy, he might really be an emperor in the future. If it was a boy, then it would be Long Fei Ye's eldest son, the future crown prince. Han Yunqi didn't care about the gender of the child, and she believed that Long Fei Yi wouldn't care either. However, once her pregnancy was made public, how many people would pay attention to the child's gender? Han Yunqi sat down on the warm couch, and Zhao Mama immediately brought her some water. Seeing that her highness also sat down, Zhao Mama tactfully retreated. At the same time, she had all the servant girls and physicians in the room withdraw. When Zhao Mama left the tent, she saw Bailey Mingxiang standing in the distance and waving at her. Zhao Mama was really surprised. She didn't expect Bailey Mingxiang to be here. Zhao Mama hurriedly walked over and looked Bailey Mingxiang up and down. "Miss Mingxiang, I heard from that Chu boy that you were the one who took care of him all this time. You took care of that Chu boy so well, so how did you become so thin?" Bailey Mingxiang smiled and looked at Zhao Mama. "Mama, you're young now." "That's right. Now that His Highness and the princess are back, my old bones are full of energy. Of course I'm young. I still have to serve the little master in the future." Zhao Mama said seriously. "Mama, I just came to see you. I'll return to the army later. I haven't seen my father and older brother in a long time. I miss them very much." Bailey Mingxiang should actually go to the army to receive her punishment. Back then, His Highness had awarded her a military medal and a military rank for the Snake Cave incident. It seemed like a reward, but it was actually a punishment. She would have to live a military life for the rest of her life. Zhao Mama understood this very well in her heart. She secretly thought that it might not be a bad thing for Miss Mingxiang to stay in the army. In the future, she could find a general she liked to marry. That would be better than her older sisters. Based on the military rank His Highness had bestowed on her, even if Bailey Yuanlong was willing to marry off his daughter, ordinary families wouldn't dare. Zhao Mama understood many things in her heart, but she didn't expose them. She took Bailey Mingxiang's hand and said amiably, "Girl, Mama misses you. Your father must miss you too. Go back. If you miss Nanny, come and see her often." Bailey Mingxiang smiled faintly. "I might have to make a trip to the Navy, so I won't be able to come. Mama, I have something for you." Chapter 1173. Bailey Mingxiang wanted to give Zhao Mama nothing else but a list of things to ask for. "Mama, I've been taking care of the princess's meals for the past half a month. I've listed everything she likes, dislikes, and disgusts at the sight of." Zhao Mama was overjoyed. "Good, very good. I'll take a good look at it later." Zhao Mama had made many dishes and soups for lunch today because she was afraid that the princess wouldn't have anything to eat if she didn't make enough. Some pregnant women had no appetite in the first trimester, some in the second, and some in the third. In short, there were great differences between individuals. Zhao Mama hadn't served the princess in a long time, so she didn't know what the princess's current situation was. With Bailey Mingxiang's list, she immediately felt much more relaxed. Bailey Mingxiang told Zhao Mama many more things, all of which were very detailed matters of daily life. Zhao Mama committed all of them to memory. Looking at Bailey Mingxiang, Zhao Mama couldn't help but feel a little regretful. How great would it be if this girl could stay by the princess's side? But thinking about it carefully, there were only two paths for her if she stayed by the princess's side. She could either become His Highness's concubine in the future or be a maid for the rest of her life. Not to mention the royal family, even ordinary wealthy families had many maids becoming concubines. Unfortunately, Zhao Mama was very clear that this matter wouldn't work for His Highness. Miss Mingxiang would be delayed for the rest of her life if she stayed. Little Yu has been gone for so long. Have you sent any letters? Zhao Mama asked seriously. Not yet. It's still far from Medical City to the mysterious continent. I heard from Guard Chu that we have to cross the ice sea before we can cross Northern Li's snowy mountains. Little Yu should still be on her way, Bailey Mingxiang replied truthfully. That girl. Sigh, I really miss her. Zhao Mama sighed softly. Bailey Mingxiang didn't linger. After chatting for a bit more, she left. After sending off Bailey Mingxiang, Zhao Mama carefully looked through the list. Who would have thought that the first thing on the disgusting list was an old hen? Granny Zhao's face paled. One had to know that she had stewed several bowls of chicken soup today. Old hen stewed with yam, old hen stewed with pork belly, old hen stewed with pork ribs, old hen stewed with carrots, old hen stewed with chestnuts, and old hen broth with nothing added. In short, the soup was all stewed with old hens as the main ingredient. Not good. Granny Zhao shouted and immediately ran to the kitchen. Naturally, she was going to cook the soup again. As a result, Han Yunxi had a very comfortable lunch today. Meanwhile, the dozen or so shadow guard under Chu Shifeng's command all got to drink the chicken soup. Naturally, Long Feiyi got to drink as well. After dinner, Long Feiyi said to Han Yunxi, "The soup is not bad." "You think so too?" Han Yunxi smiled. "Do you know what the best drink is?" "What is it?" Long Feiyi asked curiously. Han Yunxi was a foodie, so anything she said was good had to be excellent. Old hen stewed with lobsters. Later, have the mermaids go to Fishery Island and catch some lobsters. You have to try it. Han Yunxi said seriously. All right, Long Feiyi agreed easily. Han Yunxi almost laughed out loud, but managed to hold it in. After dinner, Han Yunxi saw that Long Feiyi wasn't planning to go to the main camp. She couldn't help but say, Bailey Yuanlong's still waiting for you. There's an emergency, so he'll come, Long Fei Yi said mildly. He had prepared a large tent in rear camp for meetings. It could hold a dozen or so people. There were no more than 10 people in Bailey Mingxiang's army who had the qualifications to discuss matters with him. Bailey Yuanlong had brought more than 20 deputy generals to receive him today. If he didn't take advantage of this opportunity to put Bailey Yuanlong in his place, what better time would he have? Although the strategist's position in Yuning's barracks was very important, he didn't have to be stationed here. He could go straight to the western battlefield, or he could go to northernly. He came to Yuning's barracks, but he didn't go to the main camp. Instead, he set up camp elsewhere. First, he wanted to give Han Yunxi a peaceful environment. Second, he wanted to tell the world that he didn't come to Yuning's barracks to favor the Bailey Mingxiang. Third, he wanted to tell Bailey Yuanlong, especially his subordinates, that although the Bailey Mingxiang's army was so powerful that they could even raise troops for themselves, he wouldn't favor them or fear them. What he was going to do next was not to restore the East Qin Empire or the Great Qin Empire. Instead, he was going to establish a brand new nation, a brand new dynasty. Next, apart from the war in the western region and northernly, everyone was most concerned about the appointment of a king and the appointment of the civil and military officials after the founding of the nation. He wanted to tell the world that he, Long Fei Yi, had the ability and courage to do so. He wouldn't appoint people by favoritism. A complicated look flitted through Han Yunxi's eyes. She didn't need to ask any questions to figure out Long Fei Yi's intentions. Long Fei Yi wanted to go to the conference tent, so Han Yunxi immediately followed him. Long Fei looked back without a word, but only stared at her with a deep gaze. Han Yunxi chuckled. Su Donglin's letter should arrive today. I'll go back and rest when it arrives. Su Donglin's letter had arrived in the morning. It was a top-secret missive. Gu Beiyuan needed 3 kinds of plague poisons. He'd already heard that a small-scale plague had broken out in the war-torn western region. It was very similar to the plague poisons used by Gu Yuntian in the past. Gu Beiyue had already rushed over in person. Gu was still in Medical City concocting medicinal ingredients. Gu Beiyue had tried to persuade Gu many times to let Mu Linger help, but Gu had refused. Gu was right. Mu Linger would only cry if she knew the truth. She wouldn't be able to calm down and wouldn't be able to help. He understood everything that Mu Linger understood. Okay. Long Fei Yi readily agreed. As soon as they entered the tent, Han Yunxi saw 3 large piles of memorials on the table. Long Fei Yi didn't have anyone he could trust. If Gu Beiyue was here, he would definitely be able to filter out many memorials that didn't need to be reviewed by him personally. In this period of time, the various parties were still unsettled and the various powers were fiercely fighting in secret. It wasn't easy to find a completely neutral person. Han Yunxi knew that this matter had to be handled by her for the time being. She was now hoping that Su Donglin's letter would come later. After Long Fei Yi sat down, Han Yunxi sat down across from him. She brought over a pile of letters and memorials. Long Fei Yi raised his eyebrows and glanced at her. She was about to explain when Long Fei Yi lowered his head again. Without a doubt, Long Fei Yi knew that he couldn't persuade this woman to leave. It was fine to let her look at the memorials as long as she didn't sit for too long. It was extremely quiet in the large tent. The husband and wife sat like this, facing each other and burying their heads. Han Yunxi quickly helped Long Fei Yi sift out a pile of memorials. I've taken care of these on my own. These are all important. You have to look at them personally. Han Yunxi said seriously. Long Fei Yi responded and didn't raise his head. He was especially focused when dealing with the memorials and letters. Han Yunxi leaned back in her chair and looked at his quiet face seriously. It was said that women were beautiful when they were serious. In fact, when men were serious, they were especially charming. After so many years, Han Yunxi could still look at Long Fei Yi in a daze. After so many years, Long Fei Yi had long been used to it. He let her look at him without batting an eyelid. Han Yunxi looked at the empty seat at the side and muttered, "Long Fei Yi, if we have a son, let him sit at the side in the future and help you review these memorials, okay?" Long Fei Yi looked at the letter in his hand, but he immediately replied to Han Yunxi, "Okay." Han Yunxi smiled and didn't disturb him. However, Long Fei Yi looked up and said, "Why hasn't Su Donglin delivered the letter yet?" "It should be soon, right?" Han Yunxi said anxiously, "Long Fei Yi, let's discuss the matter of Northernly." Because Long Fei had expressed his desire for a peaceful resolution, the generals stationed at the western borders were all trying to figure out his intentions while trying to find ways to negotiate with Western Zhou's imperial clan. Long Fei Yi didn't need to worry about the western battlefield. He only needed to let the armies fight and wait for the results. The northernly battlefield was a very troublesome problem. According to the private agreement between Long Fei Yi and Ning Qing, only the two of them knew about it. Long Fei Yi had warned Ning Qing that if Ning Qing lost a battle in Northernly, he wouldn't be polite. However, Ning Qing had asked Long Fei Yi to have a drinking contest with him. If he won, he would stay. If Long Fei Yi won, he would leave. Long Fei Yi had said that Ning Qing had to win the battle in Northernly before he was qualified to drink with him. At this point, Ning Qing had already taken over half of Northernly and hadn't lost a single battle. However, there was a problem with the Northernly battlefield. Ning Qing wanted to stop the war temporarily and continue north in early summer. The reason was simple. Winters in Northernly were especially cold, especially in the northern part of Northernly. Many divination masters had predicted that this year would be a cold winter. If it really was a cold winter, Ning Qing estimated that by the time he reached the northern part of Northernly, he would encounter the coldest time of the year. In the northern part of Northernly, there was an endless plateau. There were many swamps and lakes. Once winter came, all of them would turn into ice. The cold weather, the supply of supplies, and the adaptation of the human body were one of the problems. On the other hand, Ning Cheng's soldiers who had experienced fighting in snow had never fought on ice. As long as the enemy laid an ambush on the ice, they would be finished. Even if Jin Zi's Tiger Army helped, Ning Qing had no chance of winning. Without full confidence, Ning Qing didn't want to take risks. Not only because of his agreement with Long Fei Yi, but also because he didn't want his soldiers to die unjustly. Long Fei Yi was about to become emperor. He would reward his soldiers according to their merits. How could Ning Qing let his soldiers die unjustly on the eve of dawn? His D clan had no interest in this world. This world wouldn't belong to the Western Qin royal family. However, the soldiers under his command who had shed blood and sweat for the peace and stability of this world, and for the unification of this continent, had to get what they deserved. It didn't matter if he won or lost his bet with Long Fei in the future, or if the soldiers under his command would always follow him or scatter to different armies. He should do his best to protect their lives and fight for glory and rewards for them. Ning Qing had steeled his heart to wait until the end of spring. However, Long Fei Yi had received countless advice. He wanted Ning Cheng's army to be the vanguard, the Bailey Navy to assist, and the Bailey Navy to go up north to support. Before winter came, they would force the Northern Dynasty's emperors to surrender. What do you think? Long Fei Yi asked Han Yunxi seriously. Chapter 1174. What did Han Yunxi think of the Northernly War? Han Yunxi only asked because she wanted to hear Long Fei Yi's thoughts. She'd read many memorials, all of which urged Long Fei-yi to send troops to support Ningqing and take down Northernly in one fell swoop. She even saw a report that suggested taking advantage of the situation to send troops to Winter Crow Kingdom and take it down. Han Yunxi didn't approve of the idea at all. In her eyes, it was no different from invading. After all, Winter Crow Country had always minded its own business with the other nations of Cloud Realm continent. Even when the Great Qin Empire conquered Cloud Realm, Winter Crow Country didn't surrender. Han Yunxi despised sending troops to a small tribe that had never invaded Northernly's borders before. She didn't want Long Fei to do such a thing either. Thus, she didn't say much to Long Fei-yi before rejecting the memorials. She even made a mental note to remember the name of the soldier who wrote them. Aside from the Winter Crow Country issue, all of the other memorials were quite pertinent. Of course, they were all on point, but all of them had their own selfish motives in mind, especially those from Bailey Yuanlong's faction. When Han Yunxi didn't reply, Long Fei-yi arched a brow. "You don't want to talk about it, or?" Han Yunxi smiled. "It's hard to say. After all, I'm from Western Qin." Long Fei-yi immediately smiled as well. Han Yunxi's words had hit the nail on the head. The remonstrances mainly came from two factions. One was from the Bailey army, and the other was from the Zhongnan army. The Bailey faction represented the Bailey clan and all of East Qin's former subordinates. The South Central regions, on the other hand, represented the major clans and warlords of the South Central regions. The Bailey army had already experienced Han Yunxi's methods many times. Naturally, they did not dare to point their spear at Han Yunxi directly. Therefore, they pointed their spear at Ningqing. Not only did they want to fight with the Ning clan army on the northern expedition, but they also wanted to use the battlefield in Northernly to weaken the Ning clan army's power and even destroy them. The spearhead of the South Central military faction had always been Han Yunxi. The South Central was where the Long Fei-yi's power was. The reason why the Long Fei-yi could accumulate power and wealth in the South Central was more or less because of the large families in the Central region. Long Fei-yi sought benefits for them, and they made things convenient for Long Fei-yi. They were using each other. Those people had always hoped that Long Fei-yi would one day replace Emperor Tianhui and become Tianning's emperor. They'd also hoped to marry their daughters to Long Fei-yi and send their sons to court to seek more power and wealth. That way, they'd be able to raise their own family status and expand their influence. After all, having someone in court made it easier to become an official, and having someone in court made it easier to do business. Unfortunately, they never calculated that Long Fei-yi would be the descendant of East Qin. Long Fei-yi not only wanted Tianning, but all of Cloud Realm continent. The South Central military faction lacked the arrogance and strength of the Western regions, the power of the Bailey army, or the battle prowess of the Ning clan army. It could be said that the South Central military faction was the weakest of Long Fei-yi's military factions. They had no way of directly clashing with any of the military factions, so they didn't dare to provoke any of them. Instead, they set their sights on the Empress and the four noble consorts. Han Yunxi, Long Fei-yi's only woman, naturally became their biggest target. The South Central military faction was especially smart. On one hand, they took the initiative to stand with the Bailey army and persuade Long Fei-yi to suppress the Ning clan troops from Western Qin. On the other hand, they offered suggestions on the establishment of the capital city, the ascension to the throne, the establishment of a system, and the appointment of an heir apparent. In short, Long Fei-yi was about to become the master of Cloud Realm continent. Everyone was eyeing the position of mistress. Han Yunxi and the D clan's Ning clan behind her became the target of public criticism. Although Han Yunxi was very capable, in everyone's eyes, she was still just a woman. Moreover, she only had the Ning clan in her hands, which was her sole power. When the overall situation was still uncertain, anyone with ambition would still hold on to hope. After all, once Long Fei appointed an empress and settled the general situation, everything would be difficult. It could only be said that the South Central military faction had underestimated Han Yunxi's importance in Long Fei's heart. They had been used by the Bailey army as a military advisor, and Ningqing had suffered a calamity. Fortunately, Long Fei had asked for Han Yunxi's opinion, and Han Yunxi was a very understanding person. Her sentence, "I am from Western Qin," had hit the nail on the head. Compared to the Bailey army and the South Central military faction, Han Yunxi preferred to fight for military merits in the Western region, which wasn't as ambitious. If the generals in the Western region knew that they had left a good impression on the Empress, who would be in charge of Cloud Realm Continent's military affairs in the future, how would they feel? Long Fei looked at Han Yunxi and smiled helplessly. He didn't ask for her opinion and simply said, "In the future, I'll leave all the memorials related to the Northernly battlefield to you. How about it?" Although there were many memorials related to the Northernly battlefield, in the end, they were all about the same thing. They wanted Ningqing to be cannon fodder, the Ning clan army to die on the front lines, and the Bailey army to claim military merits. Long Fei believed that with Han Yunxi's current energy, she would be able to handle it. Of course, if Han Yunxi couldn't handle it, he would allow her to give the order to throw away all the memorials related to the Northernly battlefield in the future. Setting aside personal matters, Long Fei was also serious. Stopping the war was the wisest choice now. He didn't want to see any more memorials related to the Northernly battlefield. Han Yunxi was very surprised. She looked at Long Fei for a long time and muttered, "Long Fei, you're so willful." Long Fei had already picked up the other memorials and was flipping through them. He didn't even look up and casually replied, "As long as you're happy." A trace of craftiness flitted through Han Yunxi's eyes. "Aren't you afraid that I'll be biased?" This time, Long Fei immediately looked up and asked seriously, "Who do you want to be biased towards?" "You." Han Yunxi answered without the slightest hesitation. Long Fei thought that Han Yunxi would refute the memorials a few more times before giving a clear order. Unexpectedly, Han Yunxi actually gave Ningqing a military order in his name on the spot. All matters related to the Northernly battlefield would be decided by Ningqing, and there was no need to ask for instructions. After Han Yunxi gave the order, Su Donglin also delivered the letter from Medical City. The letter said that Gu Beiyue had already extracted the plague's poison from the Medical Academy's warehouse and told them not to worry. Although Long Fei knew that the news was false, he still took the letter and read it carefully. "I'm going back." Before Han Yunxi left, she asked, "Do you still want to drink old hen soup? I'll have Granny Zhao boil some more." "It's up to you," Long Fei said lightly. As soon as Han Yunxi left, Long Fei's eyes dimmed. He pinched his eyebrows and fell into deep thought. Soon, Han Yunxi's military order in Long Fei's name was passed down, and it set off a big wave in the military world. Although the Bailey military faction and the Zhongnan military faction were very dissatisfied, that was a military order, and no one dared to say anything. From then on, no one dared to submit memorials and interfere with the Northernly battlefield. Many people were trying to guess under what circumstances Long Fei had issued such an order. Had Han Yunxi whispered some pillow talk to him? Who knew if they would be depressed to death if they knew the truth? Ningqing was also very surprised when he received this military order. At this time, Ningqing was stationed in Northern Li's largest grassland, the Xiling grassland. He had already made sufficient arrangements. His troops were stationed in 3 different directions, and he had sufficient supplies. When the time came, the 3 armies would head north together and besiege the Northern Dynasty's emperors. By the end of spring and the beginning of summer next year, the Northern Dynasty's emperors would have run out of provisions and other supplies. At that time, he would definitely be able to conquer the entire Northernly within 2 months. This is the Western Qin princess's idea, right? Jin Zi sneered. If it wasn't Long Fei Ye's idea, would this order be given? Ning Qing retorted. Jin Zi patted Ning Cheng's shoulder and said coldly, "Their family." Ning Cheng slapped Jin Zi's hand away and looked back. What do you mean? Next year, we'll conquer Northernly and return the slave contract to me. We'll go to Wintercrow. You help me investigate my background, and I'll help you do business. How about that? Jin Zi asked. It's better to be rich than a general. My D clan does business. Do we need your help? Ning Qing retorted. East Wu's slave trade is a fat piece of meat. Jin Zi laughed. My D clan sells everything, but we don't sell people. Ning Cheng was about to leave after saying these words, but Jin Zi stopped him. Where's the warhorse? Long Fei Yi has so many soldiers under his command, and they're all eyeing you. It's a pity that you don't want to earn their money. You seem to understand the current situation. Ning Cheng said mockingly. Thanks to you, I have no choice but to understand. Jin Zi shrugged helplessly and sat to the side. Ning Cheng also sat down and asked seriously, in the end, you still want to investigate your background? Of course. Jin Zi's face was serious and no longer joking. Ning Cheng had advised him more than once to make the act real and accept the identity of the Black Tribe's orphan. Unfortunately, he wasn't interested. Ning Cheng had his own plans. If Jin Zi didn't control the Black Tribe's orphans, no one else would be able to control them. If he couldn't control them, he could only exterminate them and not leave any future troubles. Compared to the latter, he preferred to leave the Black Tribe's power behind for Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi to use. After all, the army that could understand the language of beasts was a strange army. More importantly, they were familiar with Northernly and the grasslands. However, Jin Zi refused again and again, so Ning Qing didn't try to persuade him. Men, bring wine. Ning Qing laughed. I haven't been drunk for a long time. Tonight, I won't go home until I'm drunk. Drunk? Jin Zi had already been cheated by Ning Qing several times. He and Ning Qing had drunk several times. It was clearly Ning Qing who wanted to get drunk, but in the end, he was the one who got drunk. Ning Qing, on the other hand, was still very sober. Although he was cheated time and time again, Jin Zi still readily agreed. Okay, I won't stop until I'm drunk. Drunk? Would he not think of Mu Ling then? He would not think about her purity, her stupidity, her foolishness, her lips, her teeth, and everything about her. Mu Ling, are you still chasing after Chi brother at this moment? Mu Ling, it's been so long. Have you ever thought of me and our promise in a year? At this moment, Mu Ling, was coaxing little Tang Tang to sleep in the Tang sect. She didn't know how many times Jin Zi had been drunk in the grasslands of Northernly. She also didn't know what Chi brother was going through in Medical City. She didn't even know where Chi brother was. She had been waiting for Tang Li to bring Ning Jing back to the Tang sect. Then, she would be able to rest assured about little Tang Tang and see Chi brother. She didn't even know why she was going to see Chi brother. She just wanted to see him. Chapter 1175. Han Yunxi accompanied Long Fei to settle down in Yuning's rear barracks. While she nursed her baby, she helped Long Fei deal with military affairs while listening to news from Medical City. Everything was going well. Before long, Han Yunxi received a letter from Ning Jing. Ning Jing found the famous doctor recommended by Gu Beiyue. Although it wasn't easy to invite the famous doctor, Ning Jing brought Gu Beiyue's letter to him. The famous doctor was very enthusiastic. In the letter, it said that after the doctor checked her dental sockets, he had confirmed that they could be repaired, but it would take a long time. From the selection of the denture material to the repair, and then to the later observation, it would take at least half a year. Han Yunxi finally breathed a sigh of relief. In fact, she had been shouldering the pressure from the Tang sect for Ning Jing and hadn't told Ning Jing about it. When she received the good news from Ning Jing, Han Yunxi also received a letter from Su Donglin. The Tang sect had been asking Su Donglin for the whereabouts of Ning Jing and Tang Li. After Tang Zijin went to Medical City in person, he sent people to Myriad Merchant Hall and almost got into a fight with Ning Nuo. Han Yunxi didn't want to deal with Tang Zijin in person, so she had no choice but to ask Long Feiyi for help. She took Su Donglin's letter to the main tent and put it on top of Long Feiyi's memorial. She said seriously, "When Ning Jing left Medical City with Tang Li, I told Madame Tang that Ning Jing was taking Tang Li for a walk. I didn't tell her about Tang Li's condition in detail, nor did I tell her about Ning Jing's teeth." Long Feiyi finished reading the letter, then looked up and asked, "And then?" "Tang Zijin has interrogated Su Donglin several times now. He even went to Myriad Merchant Hall to ask about Ning Jing's whereabouts." "What does he mean? Is he afraid that Ning Jing will kidnap his son?" Han Yunxi asked seriously. Unexpectedly, Long Feiyi nodded. "Yes." When Long Feiyi and the others were still in the maze, Long Feiyi had told the Shadow Guard that if he couldn't deal with Tang Li, he should inform the Tang sect to take him back. Therefore, both Madame Tang and Tang knew that Tang Li had lost his mind. "I wish Ning Jing would do that, but she won't," Han Yunxi said helplessly. With Ning Jing's personality, she would never do that. She wouldn't selfishly make decisions for Tang Li's sake, much less leave little Tang Tang alone at the Tang clan. "The dentist will take half a year. I hope I can buy them some more time." Han Yunxi pressed her hands on the table and leaned forward. She didn't look like a pregnant woman at all. Instead, she looked like a capable person. Maybe if Ning Jing takes Tang Li out for a walk, he'll recover. Long Feiyi, once they return to the Tang sect, Ning Jing's life won't be easy. You should know better than me what kind of person your uncle is. Long Feiyi waited patiently for her to finish speaking before saying, "There have been a lot of memorials from the south recently. They're all about establishing a capital. Where do you want it to be?" "I'm talking to you about Tang Li," Han Yunxi said seriously. If she didn't hate seeing Tang Zijin and having a conflict with the Tang clan, she wouldn't have come to Long Feiyi for help. Long Feiyi stood up and walked around the table to Han Yunxi. He gently caressed her stomach. He wasn't as nervous as before, but he was still very careful. "Answer me first, then I'll tell you how to deal with Tang Zijin." Han Yunxi didn't even think before saying, "Tian'an's imperial capital. In terms of location, there are dangerous passes in the north, west, and south. To the east is the sea, which can be defended by the navy. Once a war breaks out, it will be extremely difficult to capture it, whether by land or sea." Han Yunxi smiled. "Of course, that's excluding Tian'an civil strife and the chaos in the capital." Long Feiyi nodded thoughtfully. Han Yunxi continued, "Based on the climate, it's the most suitable. There are 4 distinct seasons throughout the year. The winters aren't as cold as the north, and the summers aren't as dry as the west. If you head north, it'll take you half a month to get away from the heat. If you head south, it'll take you half a month to get away from the cold. Also, there's a large hunting ground in the west, so you don't have to go too far for the autumn hunt." Long Feiyi nodded with a smile, but didn't say much. Han Yunxi continued, "Moreover, Tianning's imperial capital is well connected, so it's easy to transport all sorts of goods. It'll be very convenient for the officials below to meet with the emperor or for you to patrol the area. But there's one thing that makes it inferior to Yuning. Long Feiyi still didn't speak, but indicated for Han Yunshi to continue. Yuning is the center of Cloud Realm continent. If we make the capital city here, we can intimidate the north and west. But if we make it Tian'an's imperial capital, then the north and west will seem far away from the emperor. Han Yunshi thought it over as she spoke. Seriously speaking, Yuning isn't as good as Tian'an's imperial capital, but everything else is pretty good. Give me a clear answer, Long Feiyi smiled. Making the capital city was a big deal. Long Feiyi had been busy with this matter as well. Bailey Yuanlong had come to meet him multiple times, and even the leaders of the Southern Army had come personally to persuade him. Of course they wanted the capital to be in the south. Han Yunshi knew that her opinions would greatly influence Long Feiyi. She didn't mind voicing her opinions, but she was still very cautious when it came to making the final decision. Han Yunshi hesitated while Long Feiyi's smile grew wider. Finally, she came to a realization. All right, did you already have a plan in mind? Hurry and tell me. Let's go to the same old place. Tian'an's Duke of Qin's estate is still there. We'll build a palace on top of that and make it Tian'an's imperial capital. How about it? Long Feiyi asked. You like the Duke of Qin's estate? Han Yunshi was surprised. She always thought that Long Feiyi didn't like hiding his identity in Tianning's imperial clan. But Long Feiyi gently wrapped an arm around her neck and let her come closer. I liked the days you lived in Leisurely Cloud Pavilion. We'll still live there in the future. Hibiscus Courtyard, Leisurely Cloud Pavilion. Han Yunshi suddenly recalled the secret she discovered in his cold, dark study. All right. We'll always live there. She agreed without hesitation. She pressed her forehead against his lips and murmured, Long Feiyi, can you tell me, what? He asked. Can you tell me when you started liking me? She was already pregnant with his child, but she still blushed and blushed when he asked her this question. She didn't even dare to look him in the eye. He was very decisive. I'm not telling you. She immediately looked up to glare at him, but he only kissed her lightly. He was afraid that he wouldn't be able to control himself if he kissed her too deeply. Han Yunshi was really disappointed. If she hadn't asked him this question, she wouldn't have had such a strong desire to know the answer. But after asking and being rejected by him, she couldn't help but feel an itch in her heart. Unwilling to give up, she asked again, Long Feiyi, then do you know when I started liking you? She wanted to whet his appetite, but he said, I know. When? She asked anxiously. I'll tell you in the future. He couldn't help but laugh. Long Feiyi. She was angry. Long Fei seemed to have steeled his heart to keep the truth from Han Yunshi, because he immediately changed the topic. Tomorrow, I'll give orders to leave the construction of the palace and capital to the Tang clan. It'll be enough to keep Tang Zijin busy. You don't have to worry about Tang Li. These words immediately diverted Han Yunshi's attention. She looked at Long Feiyi and didn't know what to say. She never thought that he would hand over the supervision to the Tang sect at this time. From what she knew, there were many people who wanted the capital to be in Tian, an imperial city. Bailey Yuanlong was one of them. There were also many people who wanted the capital to be in the central and southern regions. The construction of the capital was 1,000 times more troublesome than the construction of the capital. Long Feiyi resolved the matter of the capital with a single decision. However, the construction of the capital wasn't something that could be resolved with just Long Feiyi's decision. The construction of a capital required feng shui, a blueprint, and even the selection of every tile in the palace had to be discussed. Moreover, the construction of an imperial palace and a capital wasn't something that could be done in a few months. It would take at least a year or two. Every big problem and every small problem would have countless opinions and disputes. Long Feiyi had handed this matter over to Tang Zijin to handle. First, it would ensure the safety of the imperial palace and the final blueprint wouldn't be leaked. In terms of the design of secret passageways, there was currently no one who could compare to the Tang sect. Secondly, the Tang clan was part of the East Qin imperial clan to begin with. Add that to the fact that Tang Zijin was Long Fei's uncle, and they'd all restrain themselves if Tang Zijin faced off against Bailey Yuanlong and the other factions. Third, the construction of the capital wasn't something that Tang Zijin could handle alone. The Tang sect had to use all of its power to design the blueprint in the shortest amount of time possible. In this way, Tang Li's matter could only fall to Madame Tang. Disregarding the future, at least for now, Ning Jing wouldn't be under so much pressure. After Long Feiyi solved the problem of the capital, he also helped Han Yunxi resolve Ning Jing's current problem. Han Yunxi looked at Long Feiyi, not knowing what to say. Once I give the order, you can tell Tang Zijin if you have any requests for the construction of the imperial palace, Long Feiyi added. Han Yunxi finally couldn't help but laugh. All right, definitely. Han Yunxi inwardly thought that the construction of the capital was a matter of 1 or 2 years. If Tang Zijin dared to make things difficult for Ning Jing in the future, she definitely wouldn't be polite. Normally, she didn't have any special requirements for where she lived, but when it came down to it, a drain or a wall was enough to drive Tang Zijin crazy. After settling the matter of the Tang sect, Han Yunxi didn't dare to disturb Long Feiyi. Long Feiyi had been very busy recently. Before the new capital was built, Yuning would be the temporary capital. The construction of the palace in Yuning Prefecture had already begun. There were many things that Long Feiyi couldn't do alone during the construction of the country. While he was paying attention to the situation on the western battlefield, he was also discussing military affairs, government affairs, and many other matters with his trusted generals and civil officials. In terms of military affairs, the distribution of garrisons, the appointment of officers, and the deployment of troops had to be done neatly. As for government affairs, they were even more troublesome and trivial. For example, the appointment of officials at all levels, the division of administrative regions, the unification of currency, taxes, laws, and so on. Although these matters weren't urgent, they could be considered after Long Feiyi declared himself the emperor and established the country. However, before Long Feiyi discussed with his subordinates, he had to understand the various aspects and the situation of the various regions. When Han Yunxi left the tent, she looked back at Long Feiyi and felt extremely distressed. Chapter 1176. Han Yunxi had just returned to her tent when she saw Bailey Yuanlong and a group of people enter the large tent for discussion. She knew that Long Fei would only show up very late tonight. She immediately ordered Granny Zhao to boil soup for Long Feiyi. She didn't know about Gu and Gu Beiyue's current situation. She could only sigh in her heart. If Gu Beiyue wasn't busy helping Xiao Qi find the antidote to his undying body, Gu Beiyue would definitely be of great help to Long Feiyi. Just like that, 3 months passed in the midst of their busy work. During these 3 months, not all the news from Medical City was good, but the bad news wasn't too bad either. It was nothing more than a failed prescription. Gu Beiyue was the one who thought of mixing good news and bad news. It was also because of this that Han Yunxi didn't suspect anything. In reality, Gu Beiyue didn't find a single antidote for the plague during these 3 months. Gu no longer wore his red robes. Instead, he hid himself in a large black robe, just like Gu Qixia in Medicine Ghost Valley. Other than his eyes, nothing else was exposed. He would sit on the roof for an entire day. He would even joke with Gu Beiyue about where he would plant himself if he really turned into a tree. Gu Beiyue would always smile and tell him, "Shao Qi, I can cure you. Trust me." Gu would always nod. "Of course I trust you." Mu Ling'er was still waiting at the Tang sect. She knew everything about Ningjing and Tang Li, as well as their whereabouts. She clearly wanted to leave the Tang sect, but she still wrote a letter to Ningjing, telling her not to worry about little Tang Li. She told her to take Tang Li around and come back a few months later. Tomorrow night, Mu Ling'er would sit on the roof and lie on her back like Qi brother, looking up at the starry sky. She had always missed Qi brother. She didn't want to have a future with Qi brother. When Qi brother rejected her, she knew that there wouldn't be a future. She just wanted to purely miss someone. Occasionally, she would think of Jin Zi. It wasn't that she missed him, but she would remember that there was someone who loved her. Ningjing's denture had already been inserted. She was also waiting. Every night, she would stay by Tang Li's side, hoping that Tang Li would suddenly wake up and cook a bowl of sweet red bean porridge for her. Han Yunxi was also waiting. The baby in her belly was already 8 months old, and fourth young mistress Ren was already on her way. It was said that pregnancy lasted for 10 months, but in reality, it was only 9 months. Han Yunxi had never been a sleepy person, but for some reason, she had become especially sleepy recently. She wanted to help Long Feiyi with some of the government affairs, but she couldn't do it. Sometimes, she even wanted to wait for Long Feiyi to come back before going to sleep. However, as she waited, she unknowingly fell asleep. When she woke up the next day, it was already late in the morning. Long Feiyi had already left. Long Feiyi was also waiting. In the past 3 months, there had been a lot of good news on the western battlefield. 2 major military factions in western Zhou had surrendered. Taking advantage of this momentum, he resolutely appointed Chu Tianyin as the general of the western frontier and gave him a large army. This matter not only completely won Chu Tianyin's heart, but also made many of the civil and military officials of western Zhou see his magnanimity and surrender. It could be said that in 3 months, Long Feiyi had taken over half of western Zhou with minimal losses. Currently, Chu Tianyin and the Western Army were attacking western Zhou's capital from the east and the south. With the situation set in stone, it would only take 10 days to destroy western Zhou. Although Long Feiyi was tired from military and government affairs, he was still able to carry out his plans with ease. He could declare himself emperor and establish a country at any time. Gradually, people began to urge him to prepare for the coronation ceremony, but he was still waiting. He was waiting for his child to be born, and for news of Gu Beiyue. He hoped that he could spend a month with Han Yunxi before she gave birth, and that he'd receive good news of Gu Beiyue after the winter, so he could sit on the throne without regrets. Today, Long Feiyi was sunbathing with Han Yunxi in front of the tent when Chu Shifeng personally called fourth young Miss Ren over. Long Feiyi sat lazily in his seat, but Han Yunxi rose to greet him. Fourth young Miss Ren strode over. "Princess, you can't. Don't you need to exercise more in the later stages? If you move more, you'll suffer less when you give birth," Han Yunxi teased. Like all women, fourth young Miss Ren was a little timid when speaking in front of Long Feiyi. She didn't even dare to look at Long Feiyi, but only said, "If your highness has the time, you should take the princess for a walk. There's no need to confine yourself to the barracks." Long Fei replied coldly. Zhao Mama stole glances at his highness from the sidelines. She knew that he'd take the princess 3 steps outside of the barracks from now on. Han Yunxi ordered the servant girls to sit while Long Feiyi immediately asked fourth young Miss Ren to take her pulse and examine her condition. Although a prenatal checkup was necessary, there was no need to ask a doctor to take her pulse. The other two female doctors were capable of doing basic checkups and had done so long ago. Fourth young Miss Wren didn't think it was necessary either. The two female doctors had explained the princess's condition to her on time. However, fourth young Mistress Wren still replied respectfully, yes. Han Yunshi was also obedient. However, after fourth young Miss Wren took her pulse and said that everything was normal, Han Yunshi sent Long Fei Yi away with a few words. As soon as Long Fei left, fourth young Miss Wren's entire body relaxed. Even her sitting posture changed. Princess, aren't you afraid of His Highness? Fourth young Miss Wren asked seriously. Why should I be afraid of him? Han Yunshi asked, but she quickly added, actually, I used to be very afraid of him. Han Yunshi didn't like to talk about Long Fei Yi with other women, regardless of how close they were friends or sisters. She changed the topic. How are Gu Beiyue and Gu? Of course, Han Yunshi knew that fourth young Miss Wren didn't know about Gu. She was just asking casually. However, fourth young Miss Wren's face immediately darkened. I haven't seen Dean Beiyue for several months. He handed over all the affairs of the medical city to Vice Head Shin. He seems to be in seclusion. Han Yunshi knew what was going on and could see fourth young Miss Wren's disappointment. She asked again, what about Lil Thing? She didn't harass you again, did she? Fourth young Miss Wren quickly shook her head. Actually, she hoped that Lil Thing would continue to harass her. In that case, she might be able to see Dean Beiyue again. Princess, why did you leave Lil Thing with Dean Beiyue? Fourth young Miss Wren asked curiously. Lil Thing likes Beiyue. Han Yunshi thought that this was one of the reasons. As the two chatted, Han Yunshi could see fourth young Miss Wren's melancholy, but she didn't expose her, nor did she want to talk too much. She didn't like to talk about her man with other women, nor did she like to talk about other men's relationships with other women. Just as Han Yunshi was talking about the problems with Medical City's designated medical system, fourth young Miss Wren lowered her voice and told her a secret. It was about Gu Beiyue sending someone to the Qin family to act as a matchmaker. Spend the rest of your life in a wheelchair. Han Yunshi was very surprised. I've sent someone to investigate. The marriage is real. After you left Clearbreeze Mountain, Dean Beiyue secretly sent someone to bring a matchmaker over. Although it was a secret, the news still spread. Fourth young Miss Wren's face was filled with grief. How is that possible? Gu Beiyue was very busy back then. Han Yunshi didn't believe it. Marriage was a major matter. Setting aside the fact that Gu Beiyue would choose a woman like that as his wife, at the very least, he definitely wouldn't be rash with his personality. He wouldn't be so rash, nor would he make that woman suffer and act as a matchmaker in secret. That young Miss Qin was already of marriageable age, but she never got married because of her illness. I heard the Qin family released news a long time ago that as long as the young masters of aristocratic families in Medical City were willing to marry the first young Miss Qin, the Qin family would give them a generous dowry and a set of medical books that couldn't be leaked to outsiders. However, no one was willing to marry her. As fourth young Miss Wren spoke, she sighed helplessly. She's also a pitiful person. I heard that before Dean Beiyue went to get engaged, the Qin family wanted to casually marry her off to a fifth-ranked divine doctor over 60 years old so that her younger sister could get married smoothly. First young Miss Qin even committed suicide because of this. Han Yunshi was even more surprised. Don't tell me Gu Beiyue knew about this and was in such a hurry to get engaged. It's possible, fourth young Miss Wren said helplessly. A complicated look flashed through Han Yunshi's eyes, but she didn't say anything. She was puzzled. How did Gu Beiyue know about the young miss of the Qin family? If he wanted to help the young miss of the Qin family, there were many ways. The young masters of aristocratic families in Medical City looked down on the young miss of the Qin family's dowry and medical books, but they would definitely be impressed by Gu Beiyue's high regard for the young miss of the Qin family. As long as Gu Beiyue showed that he valued the young miss of the Qin family, many young masters of aristocratic families would definitely come to ask for her hand in marriage. Why would Gu Beiyue use his own marriage to help the young miss of the Qin family? Could it be that there was something between Gu Beiyue and the young miss of the Qin family that outsiders didn't know about? Princess, why do you think Dean Beiyue did this? Fourth young Miss Ren had endured for a long time and finally found someone she could tell the truth to. She really hoped that the princess could give her a reason. However, Han Yunxi really didn't dare to jump to conclusions. She didn't know what had happened to Gu Beiyue in Medical City. Back then, when Gu Beiyue chose fourth young Miss Ren in the medical competition, both she and Gu were very surprised. If Gu Beiyue didn't say it, she was afraid that she would never know that Gu Beiyue and fourth young Miss Ren were friends. Beiyue must have his reasons for doing things. The woman he fancies must be worthy of him in some way as well, Han Yunxi intoned. She knew that it was very cruel to fourth young Miss Ren, but it was also a reminder to her. Since there was no result, she should stop thinking about Gu Beiyue. Fourth young Miss Ren was a smart person, so she understood immediately. However, she couldn't hide the tears in her eyes in the end, so she left in a hurry. Han Yunxi lay on the rocking chair, stroking her belly gently. Originally, she wanted to write a letter to Gu Beiyue to ask about this, but she gave up after thinking about it. Since Gu Beiyue went to matchmake secretly, he definitely didn't want them to know. If she asked about this matter as soon as fourth young Miss Ren arrived, Gu Beiyue would definitely guess that fourth young Miss Ren was talking too much. Han Yunxi sighed secretly. Long Fei Yi was a mystery. Only she, who slept with him, could understand. Actually, Gu Beiyue was also a mystery. She couldn't understand. She didn't know how much Miss Qin would understand. Fourth young Miss Ren was still very strong. She recovered the next day. With her in the camp, Han Yunxi could be said to be completely relaxed. She didn't have to worry about a sudden premature birth. Time passed quickly. In the blink of an eye, the end of the year was here. Han Yunxi's movements became more and more inconvenient. Long Fei Yi accompanied her almost all day. He didn't go out at all. However, on the eve of the new year, Gu Beiyue suddenly appeared at the entrance of the rear camp. Han Yunxi was very surprised, but Long Fei Yi's heart almost stopped. Chapter 1177. On the eve of New Year's Eve, Gu Beiyue suddenly paid a visit. Gu Beiyue. Han Yunxi was pleasantly surprised. She and Long Fei Yi were about to have dinner together when they saw Gu Beiyue standing at the entrance from a distance. Gu Beiyue immediately moved in front of them and bowed humbly just like before. Princess, Your Highness. Han Yunxi couldn't be bothered with his etiquette. She looked behind him and asked suspiciously, Where's Gu? He didn't come with us. Actually, Han Yunxi had thought of asking Long Fei Yi to invite everyone over to celebrate the New Year together. Last year's New Year's Eve was celebrated at the three-way black market. Although not everyone was there, it wasn't as quiet as she and Long Fei Yi. However, she didn't dare to suggest it when she considered that Gu Beiyue and Gu would be busy concocting the medicine. She knew that if she asked, Gu would definitely run over immediately. Where's Gu? Where is he hiding? Han Yunxi didn't think too much about it. Gu Beiyue's sudden appearance meant that Gu would definitely come as well. She was in a great mood. Didn't he say in the letter a few days ago that he was going to Western Zhou's desert? You're lying to me, right? Don't tell me that fellow went to buy some delicious food. Granny Zhao made a table full of dishes. Han Yunxi was standing right beside Long Fei Yi. If she were to stand opposite him, she would definitely notice how pale Long Fei Yi's face was and how tightly his brows were knitted together. Princess, seventh young master has indeed gone to the west. This subordinate went to the medicinal hut and was just passing by, so I dropped by to see Princess and ask for dinner on the way, Gu Beiyue explained with a smile. I see, Han Yunxi was a little disappointed, but she soon smiled again. Even if Gu could not make it, Gu Beiyue's arrival was something to be happy about. Let's go. I was worried that no one would be able to accompany His Highness to drink tonight. Although Long Fei Yi didn't like drinking, he would still drink a few glasses on New Year's Eve. Han Yunxi's belly was so big that she had quit drinking and drinking long ago. She couldn't accompany him. The three of them walked towards the tent together. When Han Yunxi wasn't paying attention, Gu Beiyue glanced helplessly at Long Fei Yi. Although Long Fei Yi did not understand the situation, his heart was more or less at ease. At least, he knew that Gu was still alive. Seventh young master, are you going to the west to find the last ingredient? Han Yunxi asked as they walked. She'd read about Gu Qixiao's situation in his letters, but she still needed to ask Gu Beiyue about it in person. Yes, I've done a few experiments on the blood vines recently, and they were all very successful. If we can find that ingredient, there shouldn't be a problem. Gu Beiyue replied seriously. Han Yunxi stopped and asked seriously, are you sure you can find it? Gu Beiyue looked seriously into Han Yunxi's eyes and replied, Princess, you can rest assured that seventh young master is personally looking for the ingredient. Last night, this subordinate received news that he had already bought the dried ones. He wants to stay for a few more days to see if there are any fresh ones. The medicinal effects will be better. Han Yunxi would never have thought that Gu Beiyue would lie to her for so long. Moreover, she didn't think too much of it when she saw Gu Beiyue's gentle yet firm gaze. Besides Long Fei, Gu Beiyue was the person she felt most at ease with, the person she could trust the most, and entrust the most to. She continued walking forward and started calculating. It should be the end of January by the time he returns from the west, right? If he's fast, he should be able to reach Medical City by the end of January. If he's slow, it'll be hard to say, Gu Beiyue replied. I'll probably be in confinement by then, but I still won't be able to go. Han Yunxi sighed as she stroked her big belly. You can leave seventh young master to this subordinate. Princess, you don't need to worry, Gu Beiyue said seriously. Han Yunxi and Gu Beiyue chatted along the way, but Long Fei Yi didn't say anything. He knew that Gu Beiyue's words today were all lies. What was originally a dinner for 2 people became a dinner for 3 people. Han Yunxi rubbed her belly and said with a smile, there'll be another little one at the New Year's Eve dinner next year. Amidst their idle chatter, Gu Beiyue asked Long Fei about military affairs and government affairs. Once Long Fei started discussing with him, he couldn't stop. Han Yunxi sat at the side. Although she had her own opinions, she didn't interrupt. It wasn't too cold at the top. Long Fei Yi really needed a friend like Gu Beiyue. After dinner, Long Fei Yi gave everyone red packets as usual. All the servants in the rear camp received large red packets. He even specially prepared red packets for Tang Li's family of 3, Gu Beiyue, and Gu. Fourth young Miss Ren, Zhao Mama, and the rest were eating dinner together in another tent. When they received Long Fei Yi's red packets, they immediately burst into laughter. Long Fei gave Chu Shifeng the portion he'd given to Tang Li's family of 3 and had him deliver it by eagle overnight. As for Gu's red packets, he naturally gave them to Gu Beiyue. Unexpectedly, Gu Beiyue took out 2 smaller red packets after accepting the red packets. Although they were small, they were very unique. They didn't look like ordinary red packets made of paper, but thick embroidered pouches with red silk and gold belts. It was impossible to tell how many silver notes had been stuffed inside, but they were bulging. Princess, seventh young master knew this subordinate was passing by and asked me to prepare them. He said it's a token of appreciation for the little master. Gu Beiyue's smile was filled with sadness. Actually, Gu was right near the rear camp. Gu hadn't gone to the western desert, nor had he gone to Medicine City. He wasn't just passing by. They'd made a special trip here. Despite his repeated objections, Gu Qishao still insisted on coming. He insisted on delivering a red envelope for the little master on New Year's Eve. This pouch was made by Gu himself, stitch by stitch. He'd only recently discovered that a man like Gu could do needlework. When he asked Gu Qishao how he knew, Gu Qishao only replied, "I learned it." Han Yunxi's attention was all on the pouch. She was surprised, but quickly looked towards Long Fei Yi with a chuckle. "You won't have a chance, haha. This should be the little fellow's first red packet." It was supposed to be from Long Fei Yi, but Gu beat him to it. Cloud Realm Continent had plenty of rules for giving out red packets during the new year. Only people of high status had the right to do so. Thus, Gu Beiyue couldn't give the little master a red packet. But Gu Qishao could. Gu wasn't Long Fei Yi or Han Yunxi's subordinate, so he didn't have the misgivings of being master and servant. Instead, he could give it as a friend. It doesn't count if it's not personally delivered. Long Fei Yi said as he took out a red brocade box and handed it to Han Yunxi. This brocade box was like a mysterious treasure chest. It was especially cute. Han Yunxi looked at the paper red packet she'd just received, then at the box. She suddenly felt as if she'd fallen out of favor. Long Fei took the red pouch and examined it before tossing it to the side of the table. Han Yunxi didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She took it back and glared at Long Fei Yi, who didn't say a word. Long Fei Yi didn't say a word. Gu Beiyue saw everything and knew that the princess wouldn't notice anything amiss with His Highness's reaction. After the meal, fireworks lit up the night sky in front of the barracks. Han Yunxi and the rest watched from a distance before Han Yunxi caught sight of fourth young Miss Ren standing by the tent entrance, looking at them. More accurately, she was looking at Gu Beiyue. Han Yunxi used the excuse of being tired to have Long Fei Yi send her back to rest, leaving Gu Beiyue alone. As soon as Han Yunxi and the rest were gone, Gu Beiyue headed back to the barracks as well. He knew that His Highness would come find him after the princess fell asleep. He'd hardly reached the tent Chu Shifeng had arranged for him when fourth young Miss Ren chased after him. "Academy head Beiyue, please wait." Gu Beiyue looked back with a faint smile. Fourth young Miss Ren was both surprised and flustered. Zhao Mama and the rest were already gambling at the table, so she'd come out for a breath of fresh air to see the man she'd been thinking about day and night. If His Highness hadn't been present, she would have run over long ago. Fourth young Miss Ren's heart was filled with emotions at the sight of this gentle, jade-like man with a warm smile. As the two chatted, Han Yunxi suddenly grabbed Long Fei Yi's hand. She became nervous and didn't dare to move. "What's wrong?" Long Fei Yi was shocked. "Shoo, look." Han Yunxi was very nervous. She carefully pointed to her stomach. Chapter 1178. Han Yunxi was very nervous. Long Fei Yi also became nervous. Both of them stared at Han Yunxi's big belly. After waiting for a while, there was no movement. However, the two of them still didn't dare to move. They just stared quietly. After a while, they saw a small bump on the side of Han Yunxi's abdomen. It gradually grew bigger and bigger. The little guy was bulging. Long Fei Yi couldn't help but reach out to touch it. However, as soon as his hand touched it, the little bump immediately calmed down and disappeared. This was already the 9th time. Long Fei Yi had been looking forward to fetal movement, but he was too busy and missed it countless times. It wasn't until the later stages of pregnancy that the fetal movement became very obvious that he was finally lucky enough to bump into it. At first, he just watched. After 2 or 3 times, he couldn't help but want to touch it. However, he didn't know if the little guy was naughty or afraid of him. Every time he touched it, the little guy would hide. It's the 9th time. Ha! Han Yunxi laughed. Every time the baby moved, the little guy would bulge higher when she touched it. It seemed to like her touch very much. However, when it was Long Fei Yi, the little guy didn't even want to stay and immediately ran away. Are you afraid of me? Long Fei Yi had always wanted to figure it out. However, if he wanted to figure it out, he would probably have to wait for a year or 2. I think so. Han Yunxi smiled and nodded. What's there to be afraid of? Long Fei Yi muttered to himself. He leaned closer and pressed against Han Yunxi's big belly, wanting to listen for movement. Unfortunately, there was no movement at all. Han Yunxi pushed him. All right, I'm going to sleep. Are you going to sleep? Han Yunxi knew that Long Fei Yi wouldn't sleep so early. She was chasing him away. At the dining table, he and Gu Beiyue talked so much that they forgot to eat. There must be a lot of things to discuss. She was very tired. Even if she had the heart to help, she didn't have the strength to do so, so she didn't want to waste any more of his time. Go to sleep. I'll accompany you. Long Fei Yi had no intention of leaving. Gu Beiyue dropped by on the way. He'll probably leave tomorrow. Didn't you want to set up the Imperial Academy of Medicine to have direct jurisdiction over the medical city and the medical city? She wanted to take this opportunity to chat with him. Once he leaves, it will probably be a few months before you can see him again, Han Yunxi said seriously. No one knows a husband better than his wife, and no one knows a wife better than her husband. Long Fei Yi was waiting for Han Yunxi to open her mouth. He knew that after Han Yunxi said such words, she would obediently sleep in the camp and not disturb him. Long Fei Yi rubbed Han Yunxi's bangs and smiled. Go to sleep then. Let's go, I'm so sleepy. Han Yunxi urged. Long Fei Yi still said a few more words before leaving. Once he left, he went to find Gu Beiyue at the fastest speed possible. He asked as soon as he entered, where is he? Naturally, he was asking about Gu. Long Fei Yi was very clear about Gu's true situation. However, he didn't expect Gu Beiyue to come. Since Gu Beiyue was here, how could Gu not come with his temperament? He didn't want to see you, so he asked me to come over and give the little master a red packet, Gu Beiyue said helplessly. Long Fei Yi didn't want to hear this explanation and asked again, where is he? Your Highness, you also know that we can't find him if he doesn't want to see you and the princess. Gu Beiyue was speaking the truth. I'll leave tomorrow morning. 7th young master said that he would wait for me at the relay station 200 li away. This subordinate doesn't know his whereabouts since last night. Long Fei Yi didn't say anything else. He sat down at the side and furrowed his brows. Gu Beiyue was also silent. After a while, he said in a low voice, Your Highness, 7th young master, only has 2 months left to live. Gu Beiyue had already said this in his letter. With the growth rate of the vines on Gu's body, it would take at most 2 months for the vines to corrode his heart and brain. At that time, Gu would completely disappear from this world, leaving behind a pile of vines. Can't the medical school cultivate those pestilence poisons? Long Fei Yi suddenly questioned loudly. They can't. If it were other poisons, they could be cultivated on death row prisoners, but pestilence. Before Gu Beiyue could finish, Long Feiyi interrupted. How many people do you need? Gu Beiyue suddenly said sternly, Your Highness. Pestilence was a contagious disease. In order to cultivate the poisons, countless people had to be used to cultivate it. In the past few months, Gu Beiyue had used more than 10 death row prisoners for experiments. Although Gu Beiyue had negotiated with the death row prisoner beforehand and given him plenty of benefits so that he'd do the job willingly, he still felt guilty. This was the most inhumane thing a doctor could do. They wanted to save Gu, but they also wanted others to suffer the pain that Gu had suffered in the past. He couldn't feel at ease, and neither could Gu. Long Fei's head was bowed, his profile cold as he spoke. Not long ago, Chu Tianyin captured Western Zhou's Ju city. There's a death row prison there filled with unpardonable murderers. There are over 50 of them. No. Gu Beiyue's gaze was serious as he added, moreover, it's not enough. The poison that Gu Yuntian had used on Gu came from the most famous pestilence in Cloud Realm's history. That year, nearly 10,000 people had died in Cloud Realm. What could a mere 50 people produce? Long Feiyi was speechless. He stood up and asked indifferently, Gu Beiyue, have you given up? No. Gu Beiyue replied without hesitation as he stood up as well. Long Feiyi turned and left, leaving behind a sentence, return to Medical City immediately. Long Feiyi returned to Han Yunxi's tent, but he didn't go in. He stood there for a long time, unsure if he should tell Han Yunxi the truth. But now, he had to consider another problem. There were only 2 months left. Would Han Yunxi still have time to see Gu one last time? The fireworks in the barracks continued to bloom in the night sky, resplendent and gorgeous. Unfortunately, they only lingered for a moment before disappearing without a trace. Gu's smile was even more dazzling than the fireworks. How long could Gu continue to shine in this world? How long could he stay? Long Feiyi gazed at the fireworks. Gu Beiyue also stood at the entrance of the barracks, gazing at the sky full of fireworks. He knew that Gu must be nearby at this very moment, watching the same fireworks as them. Gu was on a small hill behind the barracks. He sat alone on a large rock, gnawing on a steamed bun as he gazed at the fireworks in the distance. His long and narrow eyes reflected the splendor of the fireworks. When he finished eating the steamed bun, so did the fireworks. He muttered to himself, how beautiful, it's a pity it's so fleeting. He lay down on his back and stretched lazily. Then, he casually spread his legs to form the character. The wide black robe covered his body and limbs, only his face could be seen. His face was still as beautiful and alluring as ever, as if he was a celestial being. After the fireworks ended, the whole world fell silent and dimmed. Only the whistling of the north wind was left. Gradually, the north wind blew up his black robe and woke him up from his memories. He became excited again and sang the mountain song loudly. It was the same mountain song that Han Yunxi and the rest laughed at all the way. Sing the mountain song is like the spring river water, singing here and there. However, as he sang, his rough voice changed, and so did the words. Miss the beauty, day and night, the beauty is like a flower in the clouds, I can't dream of returning to the south, laughing at the common people laugh at me, laughing at the common people, who cares who is the king of Sky Cloud, I'm crazy and crazy, no one listened to this song, and no one laughed. But Gu continued to sing at the top of his lungs, carefree and open-minded. He used the tune of the mountain song to shout out his truest feelings, his truest intentions. He was the cruelest, purest, and truest existence in the world. In the last 2 months, he didn't want to go anywhere. He just wanted to stay here and watch the smoke curl up from the chimneys of rear camp every morning, and the stars and lanterns every night. Then he would quietly take root and become a tree. He would bloom into a mountain flower more dazzling than the fireworks. Early next morning, Gu Beiyue sat in his tent for an entire night before making a decision. Before he left, he asked Chu Shifeng to deliver a letter to Mu Ling, telling her to hurry to Medical City to help him. He didn't mention a word about Gu, only that there was a patient who needed medicine. Without saying a word, he left as fast as he could for the relay station 100 li away. Long Fei Yi stayed by Han Yunxi's side all night. When Han Yunxi woke up, he pretended as if nothing had happened. Just like every other morning, he planted a light kiss on her forehead and asked her what she wanted to eat. Soon enough, Chu Shifeng returned with a report. Your Highness, Princess, Dr. Gu received an urgent message and is rushing back to Medical City. What message? Han Yunxi asked hastily. I think he found some sort of medicine. This subordinate isn't sure, Chu Shifeng replied. Han Yunxi wanted to ask more questions, but the shadow guard came with a letter from Ning Jing. Han Yunxi opened it and was thrilled. Long Fei Yi, Ning Jing's coming. She's bringing Tang Li with her. Her teeth are basically fine now. Excellent, Long Fei missed that little brother of his as well. That very afternoon, snowflakes began to fall from the skies. The snowfall grew heavier and heavier until it stopped on the third day of the new year. The weather was exceptionally cold. Perhaps it was because of the weather, but Han Yunxi began to have trouble breathing. Fourth young Miss Ren stayed by her side all day long, while Long Fei Yi stayed close behind. Soon enough, Long Fei Yi received a letter from Gu Beiyue. Gu hadn't returned to Medical City, but was staying near rear camp. Gu Beiyue waited an entire day at the relay station before finding out. He immediately turned back to find him. Gu didn't want to leave, so Gu Beiyue had no choice but to accompany him while ordering people to deliver the medicine and Lil Thing from Medicine City. Long Fei Yi didn't ask where they were staying, nor did Gu Beiyue. It was clearly the beginning of spring, but the weather was getting colder and colder. Northern Li experienced a cold spell in late spring. Soon enough, news of a snowstorm spread, especially in the northern regions. Many villages had their roads closed and food supplies were scarce, leading to mass starvation. This reality was a slap to the faces of the Bailey and southern armies. Fortunately, Ning Qing hadn't sent out his troops. If he did, the casualties would be unimaginable. Today, Long Fei Yi received a letter from Ning Qing. Northern Li's snowstorm had broken out on a large scale, starving civilians and livestock to death. The Northern Dynasty's emperors were reluctant to send out food supplies for the sake of guaranteeing the army's rations. But Ning Qing had taken the initiative to ask for reinforcements. He wanted to send out troops at this critical juncture. Just as Long Fei Yi finished reading the report, Chu Shifeng suddenly burst in and shouted, Your Highness, the princess is about to give birth. The princess is about to give birth. Chapter 1179. Han Yunxi was going to give birth soon. After hearing Chu Shifeng's report, Long Fei Yi tossed aside the letter in his hands and rushed out of the tent. Han Yunxi had just woken up and hadn't even eaten breakfast when her stomach started hurting. She didn't think it'd be so soon, but fourth young Miss Ren and a few other female nurses had already examined her. Fourth young Miss Ren told Han Yunxi to eat breakfast quickly so she wouldn't be too weak to give birth later. She also ordered Zhao Mama to prepare some hot chicken soup and the servant girls and nurses to bring out all the things they'd prepared beforehand. Everything had long been prepared. Fourth young Miss Ren was Cloud Realm Continent's #1 obstetrician, but Han Yunxi's cry of stomach pains still made everyone nervous. They were so nervous that they forgot to inform Long Fei Yi at first notice. Han Yunxi was nervous as well. She'd done all sorts of things in her life, but she'd never given birth to a child before. She endured the pain and paced back and forth in the tent, assuming that the servants had already told Long Fei. She had no idea that they'd forgotten. Zhao Mama had just rushed out of the tent to the kitchens when she bumped into Chu Shifeng. As soon as he understood the situation, he went to report to His Highness. Han Yunxi was at the very back of the tent while Long Fei's meeting tent was at the very front. Long Fei had just arrived when he heard Han Yunxi's screams from inside. Ah, the water broke. Long Fei gave a start as he stood gaping by the tent's entrance. He'd been anxious the entire way here, but Han Yunxi's screams made him nervous. Hurry and help the princess lie down. Add 5 more stoves and send more people to boil hot water. We can't cut off the water. Fourth young Miss Ren was nervous as hell, but she was still able to keep her composure. She washed her hands and prepared to examine Han Yunxi a second time while ordering the servants to prepare the necessary items. The princess is still hungry. Tell Granny Zhao to quickly send the chicken soup over. It has to be hot enough to burn the mouth. Long Fei didn't hear fourth young Mistress Ren's voice or Han Yunxi's. Only then did he come back to his senses. Just as he was about to enter, the maidservant suddenly opened the door and rushed out, directly bumping into him. The maidservant was in a hurry. When she looked up and saw Long Fei's cold face, she immediately screamed, "Ah!" When the people in the tent heard this voice, they all looked over. Han Yunxi lay on the bed. Although her water broke and her abdomen was in pain, she was very conscious. "What's wrong? What happened?" she asked aloud. "Princess, take care of yourself first. The cervix has already dilated by 4 fingers. This is an emergency delivery and the risk is not small." Fourth young Miss Ren said seriously. 4 fingers. Han Yunxi was dumbfounded. She didn't expect her water to break and the cervix to dilate so quickly. Although it was already the expected date of delivery, this little fellow didn't have to be so anxious to come out. Generally speaking, the labor process was divided into 3 stages. The first stage of labor was the process from the beginning of the contraction until the cervix was fully dilated. The pain was caused by the contraction. At the same time, the cervix would gradually dilate from 1 finger to 10 fingers. During the dilation of the cervix, the water would break. For a woman giving birth for the first time, it took a certain amount of time from the pain to the dilation of the cervix. However, this was only the first time Han Yunxi was in pain. Moreover, this was the first time her water broke and the cervix was dilated by 4 fingers. Even fourth young Mistress Ren was afraid of this speed. One had to know that an emergency delivery could easily cause a series of problems, such as fetal ischemia, hypoxia, and damage to the newborn. It could also affect the mother. If there was excessive bleeding, postpartum infection, and so on. It wasn't that fourth young Miss Ren hadn't encountered such situations before, but this was Han Yunxi. This was the future empress of Cloud Realm Continent, while this child could be the future eldest princess or even the crown prince. For a moment, she couldn't help but wonder if she'd be able to make it back to Medical City alive if something happened to Han Yunxi and her daughter. Of course, fourth young Miss Ren quickly reined in her thoughts. Han Yunxi was well aware of what an emergency delivery was like. She couldn't care less about what was going on outside, but focused on cooperating with fourth young Miss Ren's requests. Long Fei had already kicked aside the servant girl by the door. She was making a fuss at such a critical moment, so it was better not to use her. As soon as Long Fei entered, he saw fourth young Miss Ren and 2 other female physicians by the bed. Han Yunxi was sweating profusely in the middle of winter. She was adjusting her breathing according to fourth young Miss Ren's requests. She was so focused that she didn't even notice Long Fei's arrival. Fourth young Miss Ren didn't notice him either, but the two female physicians and servant girls did. When a woman was giving birth, men weren't allowed to enter. But no one dared to say anything to Long Fei Yi, much less look at him. The female physicians cooperated with fourth young Miss Ren and pressed Han Yunxi's stomach to adjust her breathing. The servant girls went in and out of the room to deliver hot water and clean towels, not daring to delay. Soon enough, Zhao Mama arrived with a large bowl of hot chicken soup. As soon as she saw Long Fei Yi standing by the side, she almost cried out. Fortunately, she held back. She hurried over and murmured, "Your Highness, get out, get out. Hurry and get out." Long Fei handed over the chicken soup instead. Zhao Mama grew even more anxious. "Your Highness, you can't come in. If news of this gets out, the princess will be cursed by the world. First of all, it wasn't appropriate for a man to be present when it came to women. Neither His Highness nor the princess felt embarrassed, but all the women present would feel awkward. Second of all, the delivery room had always been considered a filthy and unclean place. Some people even thought that seeing the dirty blood in the delivery room would lead to a bloody disaster. In a few months, His Highness would ascend the throne. If news of this got out, people would definitely make an issue out of it. Third of all, Zhao Mama was old and didn't have any personal experience, but she had seen a lot. At this moment, the princess was in her most embarrassing state. She definitely didn't want Long Fei Yi to see her like this. This prince wants to see who dares to scold her. Long Fei Yi said. He was about to walk over, but Zhao Mama stopped him. Your Highness, the princess definitely doesn't want you to see her like this. I've already seen it. Long Fei Yi glared at her coldly. Zhao Mama immediately shut up. She knew that if she dared to say another word, His Highness would send her flying. She could only shut up and wait for the princess to personally drive her out. But who knew that as soon as Long Fei Yi walked over, Han Yunxi would reach out to hold his hand. Zhao Mama was dumbfounded. Sure enough, she couldn't use common sense to guess the princess's thoughts. Han Yunxi was waiting for Long Fei Yi to come over. She could bear the pain, but she couldn't bear the pressure of the labor. No matter how strong a woman was, she still needed a man who was stronger than her. He didn't need to give too much, but he had to be timely. Seeing Long Fei Yi personally bring the chicken soup over, fourth young Miss Ren was also dumbfounded. Long Fei Yi asked, "Do you want to drink it now?" Han Yunxi exhaled a mouthful of turbid air. The pain had just stopped, but the next one hadn't arrived yet. She put her elbow on the bed and helped herself up slightly. Yes, drink it now. I haven't eaten, and I'm almost out of strength. Long Fei Yi hurriedly fed her spoon by spoon. Be careful, it's hot. It's okay, it's better if it's a little hot. Han Yunxi replied. Fourth young Miss Ren looked at the couple and was at a loss for a moment. She had thought that Han Yunxi would cry and scream in pain when Long Fei Yi came over. Who knew that she would be even calmer? Most of the time, a woman's strength was forced out because she had no one to rely on. She could only hold on by herself. Therefore, most of the time, once a man appeared, even the strongest woman would break down instantly. She would scream in pain and cry like a little girl. However, Han Yunxi wasn't like that. When she was enduring the pain and pressure, Long Fei Yi's arrival didn't make her cry in pain. Instead, it made her stronger. This kind of woman was a true powerhouse. Han Yunxi drank very quickly, and Long Fei Yi also fed her quickly. God knew if Long Fei Yi often fed Han Yunxi in private. The two of them cooperated very well. In a short while, Han Yunxi finished the entire bowl of hot chicken soup. After Han Yunxi finished drinking, she held Long Fei Yi's hand tightly and immediately let go. She said seriously, Long Fei, can you wait outside? Long Fei didn't know that Han Yunxi was in labor. He was a little hesitant, but he quickly nodded. He lifted the hair that had fallen on Han Yunxi's face and kissed her forehead heavily before immediately leaving. Han Yunxi immediately lay down. She didn't know if it was the bowl of chicken soup or Long Fei that gave her strength. She said, "Fourth young Miss Ren, I have strength again. It's starting to hurt again. Let's do it again." Fourth young Miss Ren had seen many strong women, but she believed that Han Yunxi was the most admirable one. She had the two female medical attendants come over and began to adjust Han Yunxi's breathing to match the contractions. Zhao Mama's gaze followed Long Fei out the door until Long Fei shut it behind him. Only then did she recover her wits. She muttered to herself, "It's still the princess who can treat His Highness." Long Fei was naturally calm in front of Han Yunxi. But as soon as he left the tent, he couldn't help but feel nervous. Everyone in the rear camp knew that the princess was about to give birth, but no one dared to approach. Only Chu Shifeng remained by Long Fei's side. As Long Fei paced back and forth, Chu Shifeng grew nervous as well. He followed closely behind him as he paced back and forth. Suddenly, Long Fei stopped, scaring Chu Shifeng into backing away. "Why, didn't I hear her scream?" Long Fei asked. "Don't all women who give birth yell and scream?" Chu Shifeng finally noticed the problem. He stammered for a while before admitting, this subordinate doesn't understand." Long Fei started pacing back and forth again. Soon enough, he heard a clear cry from inside the tent. She'd given birth. Long Fei stopped in his tracks. He felt as if the entire world had turned silent except for that cry. She'd given birth. Han Yunxi had given birth. She's given birth. He muttered to himself. Excitement, nervousness, surprise, and all sorts of complicated emotions flooded his heart. Chapter 1180. Long Fei couldn't wait to rush into the delivery room, but he stopped when he remembered that Han Yunxi had asked him to wait outside. At this time, Zhao Mama rushed out with a face full of excitement. Your Highness, the princess gave birth to a. Is she well?" Long Fei anxiously interrupted. Zhao Mama was stunned again. She had been in the palace for so many years. No matter if it was the empress or the concubine giving birth, the first thing the emperor asked about was the gender. In the imperial family, this was a big deal. Who knew that His Highness would interrupt her and ask about the princess? Zhao Mama quickly replied, "Fourth young Miss Ren said that everything went well, but to be safe, she still needs to be observed for a while." "What about the child?" Long Fei quickly asked again. He was only concerned about the child's safety and didn't care about the gender. She's well. Zhao Mama was so excited that she was about to cry. She quickly reported the good news. Your Highness, the princess gave birth to a son for you. It's a son. Long Fei was so excited that he was at a loss. This was probably the first time in his life that he was at a loss. He didn't even know what to say or do. One moment he frowned, the next he smiled, and paced back and forth in front of the door. Until Zhao Mama reminded him, Your Highness, it's cold outside. The princess won't let you take the child out. You should quickly go in. Long Fei then realized that he wanted to rush in just now. According to the rules of the palace, Han Yunxi's tent was the delivery room. The delivery room was not to be casually entered. The child had to be taken out for His Highness to see and then handed over to the wet nurse to take care of. The princess would be transferred to another room to prepare for her confinement. Zhao Mama had just been glared at, so she didn't dare to mention any rules. She only ordered the servants to quickly prepare clean bedding. She knew that His Highness probably wouldn't sleep in a separate room from the princess. Long Fei-yi nervously and helplessly entered the room. As soon as he entered, he was touched by the scene in front of him. He saw Han Yunxi lying on the bed with a pale face. The little fellow, who had been washed and wrapped in swaddling clothes, was sleeping in the crook of her arm. The mother and son were lying in the clean bedding. The little fellow had stopped crying. Han Yunxi looked at the little fellow and smiled. Unknowingly, there was a feminine charm that Long Fei-yi had never seen before. Seeing Long Fei-yi enter, fourth young mistress Ren dismissed the nurses and maidservants. She whispered to Han Yunxi, "Princess, there's no major problem. I'll be right outside. Call me if you feel any discomfort." After she finished speaking, she quietly walked around Long Fei-yi and left. After everyone left, Long Fei-yi finally couldn't help but laugh. He almost rushed to Han Yunxi's bedside. He looked at her, then at the little fellow, then at her, then at the little fellow. His gaze moved back and forth, as if no matter who he looked at, he couldn't get enough of it. Han Yunxi didn't say anything at first, thinking that he was excited. However, after a while, Han Yunxi hugged his face with both hands. "Long Fei-yi, are you stupid? What are you doing?" Long Fei-yi was excited and helpless. I'm just happy. Happy. Han Yunxi couldn't help but laugh. "As long as you're happy." Long Fei-yi leaned over and kissed her forehead gently. He said seriously, "It's been hard on you." "It's my pleasure." Han Yunxi spoke from the bottom of her heart. Long Fei-yi didn't reply other than kissing her again. His gaze finally fixed on the little fellow's sleeping face. The little fellow was really, really small. His little face wasn't even as big as his palm. Although he was just born, the little fellow's skin was especially clean. It was just a little red. His forehead was broad, and his hair was black and dense. His eyes were still closed. Judging from his eyeliner, he must have a pair of big eyes. His nose was very high, and the shape of his mouth was most like Long Fei-yi's. Overall, the little fellow looked 70 to 80% like Long Fei-yi, and only 20 to 30% like Han Yunxi. Long Fei-yi carefully studied his son's appearance. The usual coldness in his dark and deep eyes was really gone. Instead, it was filled with love and doting. He carefully took the little fellow's hand and placed it in his big palm. The contrast between the big and small made his hand look bigger and the little fellow's hand look smaller. "My son," he muttered to himself. No, our son. Even though he had conquered the country, holding this little hand felt a sense of responsibility that was heavier than the country. From now on, there was one more person in his life, a child that he needed to take care of for several years. Long Fei-yi held the little fellow's hand and kissed it carefully. He asked Han Yunxi seriously, "Can I hold him? Do you know how to hold him?" Han Yunxi asked in return. Such a small child, she was a little nervous and at a loss to hold him, let alone Long Fei-yi. Those who said that one would be able to do everything after giving birth were pure lies. She had to learn. When Han Yunxi asked, Long Fei-yi realized that he had never held a child before. Not to mention such a small one, he had never even held a 6 or 7-year-old child. How to hold him? Long Fei-yi hesitated for a long time, but in the end, he still called Zhao Mama over. There was no need for Long Fei-yi to say anything. When Zhao Mama came over, there was no need for Long Fei-yi and Han Yunxi to say anything. Seeing that Long Fei-yi did not hold the child, she skillfully picked up the little fellow. "Your Highness, quickly hold the little master. The little master must like you very much." Long Fei Yi reached out with both hands to receive the child. Zhao Mama immediately corrected him. "It's not like that, Your Highness. Let the little master's head rest in the crook of your arm, and support his body with the other hand." "Yes. Just like that." After Long Fei Yi held the little fellow, Zhao Mama adjusted him again. Long Fei Yi's movements were stiff, and the sound hurt the little fellow. In fact, Long Fei Yi's hands were big and strong. The little fellow would definitely be more comfortable in his arms than Han Yunxi and Zhao Mama's arms. "Your Highness, look at the little master sleeping so soundly," Zhao Mama said with a smile. Han Yunxi looked at Long Fei Yi's proud figure. Holding such a little fellow, she could not stop smiling. She only felt especially happy. Long Fei Yi held his son and could not bear to put him down. After a while, the little fellow slowly opened his eyes. Long Fei Yi was surprised and happy. He opened his eyes, he opened his eyes. His voice was especially soft, for fear of startling the little fellow. He quickly sat down with the little fellow and let Han Yunxi look at him together. Zhao Mama also came over and was extremely excited. "Oh, how strange, how strange. How long has it been since he was born? He actually opened his eyes. In the future, he will definitely be amazing." Long Fei Yi was wholeheartedly focused on his son, and did not hear what Zhao Mama said. Han Yunxi was too lazy to explain to Zhao Mama. Children could open their eyes in the mother's womb. After birth, because they had to adapt to the light and because they spent most of their time sleeping, most children would only truly open their eyes after 1 or 2 days. It was very normal for them to open their eyes at birth. Long Fei Yi moved very close. Han Yunxi also hurriedly moved closer, hoping that the first person her son saw when he opened his eyes was his father and mother. The little fellow's eyes opened very slowly. At first, it was only a small slit, and he stopped moving for a long time. "Is he asleep?" Long Fei Yi could not help but ask. "Wait a little longer." Han Yunxi also did not understand. However, after a while, the little fellow continued to open his eyes. This time, both of his eyes were open. He truly opened his eyes. Long Fei's smile grew wider as he scooted closer. Unexpectedly, the little fellow gave a whimper at the sight of him and burst into tears. Long Fei Yi hurriedly picked him up to coax him. Who knew that it would be fine if he did not hug him, but when he hugged him, the little fellow cried even louder. This made Long Fei Yi feel helpless and awkward. "Hungry. He must be hungry," Zhao Mama hurriedly said. Han Yunxi carried the little fellow over to feed him. As soon as the little fellow was in her hands, he immediately stopped crying. That pair of eyes that had been washed by tears were especially clear and flawless. It was so clean that it could cleanse the heart of an extremely evil person. Such clean and pitiful eyes made Long Fei Yi's heart, which had been cold and hard for more than 20 years, melt in an instant. Besides smiling, he did not know what to do. He was Cloud Realm's #1 expert, unparalleled. However, this little fellow who had not even been born for a day had completely defeated him with a single look. Han Yunxi fed the little fellow while Long Fei Yi stood guard at the side. Zhao Mama asked timidly, "Your Highness, this servant has ordered someone to make a bowl of noodles for the princess. Shall I bring it in?" Only then did Long Fei Yi remember that Han Yunxi hadn't eaten yet, so he hurriedly had Zhao Mama prepare it. Long Fei Yi accompanied Han Yunxi in the tent while news of Han Yunxi giving birth quickly spread throughout the rear barracks, then to the Yuning army camp. Long Fei Yi didn't deliberately announce this news, but he didn't give the order to conceal it either. Thus, on the day the child was born, the news spread out of the Yuning army camp and to all parts of Cloud Realm. Gu Beiyue and Gu lived in the mountains behind the rear barracks. When Gu Beiyue returned from the county town, he brought back the good news to Gu. Gu had originally been curled up in his black robes, sitting in front of the door and basking in the sun. As soon as he heard that Han Yunxi had successfully given birth, his head popped out. He immediately poked his head out of the black robe. He was incomparably pleasantly surprised, and his smile was even more brilliant than the winter sun at noon. Gu Beiyue, I'm a godfather. I have a godson. Ha! Poison Lass gave birth to a son. Ha ha ha, I have a godson. No one had promised him to be a godfather. But he was so happy to accept it just like that. He stood up and was about to head down the mountain in excitement. However, after taking a few steps, he stopped in his tracks. He stood there for a moment, then turned back with a smile to sit by the door and continue basking in the sun. Seeing Gu Beiyue staring at him, he pursed his lips and said, "What are you looking at?" Just now I wanted to go to the thatch, but now I don't feel anything." Gu Beiyue didn't expose him. He took out a seed and handed it to 7th young master. "I sent someone to Northernly to collect a few plague-infected corpses and nurtured 2 medicinal poisons. Although it's different from the one you used back then, you should at least give it a try." Gu was very obedient and immediately planted the seed in the little bit of flesh left on his leg. The thorny vines immediately flowed along his leg and out of his black robes. Gu Beiyue applied the medicine he needed to concoct, and the two waited quietly like they had done countless times before. In the end, the thorny vines were still fine and didn't move at all. "Gu Beiyue, if the thorny vines can bloom, will they bloom purple flowers?" "Poison Lass likes purple," Gu asked indifferently. At this moment, an eagle landed beside them. Gu Beiyue didn't answer Gu, but took the letter from the eagle's leg. Mu Ling had arrived at Medical City. This was also what Gu Beiyue had told him to say. Gu Beiyue was such a thorough person that he obviously knew those handwriting and herbs couldn't escape Mu Linger's eyes. Mu Linger put her hands on her hips. She wouldn't side with Chi brother when it came to matters of medicine. She huffed, "This person is about to die. How can Chi brother do this? He's too irresponsible." Yes. Su Donglin resisted the urge to agree with her, almost choking with sobs. Mu Linger said seriously, "Bodyguard Su, I'll tell you the truth. Dr. Gu has given me a huge problem this time. Without the outbreak of the plague, it's almost impossible to concoct the poisons he wants from other poisons. Actually, Chi brother has already studied them thoroughly. Dr. Gu asked me to come here at most to find out what he missed." Su Donglin panicked. "Then what should we do?" "Gu." Su Donglin almost said, "Dr. Gu is about to die." However, when he saw Mu Linger's strange gaze, he changed his words in time. "Dr. Gu is very anxious. That patient, when Dr. Gu was still in Medical City, he said that the patient only had 2 months to live. It's already been a month." Su Donglin felt like his heart was being crushed by a huge rock. He almost couldn't breathe. For the first time, he realized that lying was much harder than telling the truth. "I know that." Mu Linger looked serious. She patted Su Donglin's shoulder and said seriously, "Bodyguard Su, as doctors and pharmacists, even if we know that the patient will die tomorrow, we can't give up hope tonight." "I'll do my best." Su Donglin nodded repeatedly. "This one thanks you on behalf of Dr. Gu." Mu Linger raised her eyebrows and looked over. Then, she punched Su Donglin's shoulder. "Why are you being so polite?" Su Donglin was very sad, but Mu Linger mistook it as excitement. She smiled and said, "You really don't have to be so polite. Just treat it as me cleaning up the mess for Chi brother. Later, I'll ask him for money for the medicine." Mu Linger still added, "But the hope is really not high." Su Donglin just kept nodding. Mu Linger hesitated for a moment and couldn't help but ask of bodyguard Su, "Where did Chi brother go? Did he go to the Yuning military camp? My sister is about to give birth." Medical City was too far away, and the good news of Han Yunshi's delivery was still on the way. "I guess so. However, he definitely won't stay in the military camp. His Highness won't allow it." Su Donglin forced a smile. Mu Linger sighed helplessly. Just as she was about to turn and enter the room, she suddenly stopped and looked at Su Donglin suspiciously. Something's not right. Su Donglin's heart suddenly hung in the air. What's wrong? Mu Linger looked at Su Donglin from head to toe. Why are you staying here instead of serving your master?" I. Su Donglin, who had always been quick-witted, stammered for a long time and panicked. Mu Linger became more and more suspicious. "Who's sick? Why are you staying here to wait for news?" Su Donglin hurriedly said, "It's a friend of His Highness, Miss Linger. His Highness doesn't allow me to say, so please don't make things difficult for me." "A friend of Long Fei Yi." Mu Linger pondered for a long time and asked seriously, "Does Long Fei Yi have friends?" Su Donglin was speechless. This time, he really didn't know how to answer. Mu Linger was also not very interested. She hadn't slept much for 3 consecutive days and was very sleepy. She had already thoroughly studied all the notes left by Gu Beiyue. She had to catch up on sleep first and then start seriously pondering. No matter who was sick, she hoped that she could find a solution. Su Donglin watched Mu Linger close the door and let out a long sigh of relief, as if he had survived a great calamity. Gu Beiyue also didn't reveal the news that Mu Linger was in Medical City to Gu. As the days passed, Gu Beiyue had already sent several groups of people to the plague-stricken areas in Northernly to look for new medicinal poisons. Gu was actually the one who knew his own physical condition the best. He curled up in his black robe all day long and didn't even let Gu Beiyue examine his body. Most doctors would be fierce to their patients, be it to intimidate them or be impatient. However, Gu Beiyue was the most gentle doctor in the world. Gu didn't let him examine him, so he didn't force it. He didn't need to examine Gu Beiyue's deteriorating condition to know in his heart. Moreover, looking for medicinal poisons and examining Gu's body had no direct relationship. On this day, Gu Beiyue personally cooked and brought over a bowl of hot yuan shao. "Try it. It's my first time cooking it." Gu Beiyue smiled faintly. Gu raised his head from his black robe and looked up with a pale smile. "So it's the Lantern Festival today. Poison Girl is almost halfway through her confinement, right?" "Yes. Soon." Gu Beiyue hadn't gone to rear camp yet. If it wasn't necessary, he basically wouldn't leave this room. He was afraid that Xiao Qi would be lonely. "Can Poison Girl eat yuan shao during her confinement?" Gu asked seriously. "It depends on the fillings. With Granny Zhao and 4th Miss Ren taking care of her." Before Gu Beiyue could finish, Gu muttered to himself, "Yes, I can rest assured." Gu Beiyue still smiled faintly and nodded. "Is there a lantern festival in town tonight?" Gu asked again. "There is. It'll be very lively. Do you want to go?" Gu Beiyue asked. But Gu Qishao simply lifted up his robes to reveal his feet. More accurately speaking, he had no feet at all. Gu Beiyue had expected this, but when he saw Xiao Qi's feet become roots that dug into the ground with his own eyes, he could no longer hide the sorrow he had hidden deep inside. He looked away and said nothing for a very, very long time. I don't want to go. Gu lowered his black robe and looked at the sky. He smiled. Chapter 1182. If Long Feiyi hadn't mentioned the surname of the East Qin imperial family, Han Yunshi had forgotten about it. This matter also directly affected the naming of her precious son. In view of her own naming skills, Han Yunshi was very conscious and didn't dare to give her son a formal name. She only discussed with Long Feiyi about his nickname. After all, according to the rules of the imperial family, a prince's name couldn't be casually given. It had to be given by Long Feiyi and then be divined by a divination master. Long Feiyi hadn't officially returned to the family yet, so the naming of his son was naturally delayed. Han Yunshi thought for a while and suddenly smiled. Today is the 15th, so let's just call him 15th. On the side, Xiao Mama and the others had been completely defeated by this female master. Everyone looked at the swaddled little master sympathetically. The little master didn't understand what his parents were discussing at all. That pair of ignorant and clear eyes turned to the right to look at his father, then to the left to look at his mother. Occasionally, he would move his little mouth. He was clearly silly, but he gave people a feeling of a ghost horse, as if he was thinking of something. Long Feiyi had basically given up on Han Yunshi's naming skills. He was about to deny it when Han Yunshi laughed. In the future, he will know that this nickname was given by the Yunxiao festival. How about Yuanxiao? Little Yuanxiao. Long Feiyi suddenly thought of Gu. Gu's real name should be Xiao Qi because he was born on the 7th day of the 7th month, so he was named Qi. During this period of time, Long Feiyi didn't take the initiative to contact Gu Beiyue, nor did he ask about their residence in Yuning Army. However, he clearly remembered the time Gu Beiyue came back last time. It was already the 15th day of the first month. How many days did the 7th young master have left? Long Feiyi hadn't received a letter from Gu Beiyue for a long time, apart from Su Donglin's letter from Medical City lying to Han Yunshi about his illness. Most of the time, no news was good news. However, Long Feiyi was very clear that if there was no news from Gu Beiyue, it meant that there was no good news. Long Feiyi whispered, "He is the eldest son and will be the crown prince in the future. Even a nickname can't be casual." Long Fei thought it over, then intoned, "Give him a Rui character, so let's call him Rui." The 15th and Yuanxiao were nicknames. Han Yunshi. When Long Feiyi mentioned the surname Xianyuan, she realized that even a nickname for her son couldn't be as casual as a normal person's tea. Rui. Han Yunshi pondered over this word and quickly nodded. All right, you can decide. One had to know that the words the emperor used for the prince's name all had a meaning. It symbolized the prince's position in the emperor's heart and also hinted at the emperor's expectations for the prince. For example, the name given to the son of the empress was different from the name given to the son of the other concubines. The word Rui didn't have much meaning on the surface. It was profound and comprehensive. It meant understanding and wisdom. Most people's names would also use it. However, it would be interesting in the imperial family. Rui had a meaning. It was a respectful title for the emperor by the subjects. For example, when the subjects asked for the emperor's instructions, they would use Ming Jian and Rui Jian. The emperor's plans were called Rui Gong and his decisions were called Rui Duan. Long Feiyi bestowing this word to his son had a profound meaning. Once this news spread, the people below would basically understand what it meant. Especially those in the southern army who were eyeing the position of the crown prince. Granny Zhao, the nurses, and the servants were all women and didn't understand the meaning at all. Seeing Han Yunxi nod, they all started to praise her. Han Yunxi hugged her son and called softly, Rui, Rui, you have a name. Your father gave you more than a nickname. Hearing this, Long Fei Yi knew that Han Yunxi understood his intentions. Little Rui definitely didn't understand what his parents meant, but he could feel their emotions. He was happy and suddenly raised his hands and laughed. Han Yunxi and Long Fei Yi were both amused by him. Long Fei Yi immediately carried him over. Little Rui looked at his father's face closely and seriously. At first, it was fine, but for some reason, he suddenly burst into tears. He didn't know how many times this had happened. Long Fei Yi was very melancholy. He didn't believe it and let Rui cry as he asked Han Yunxi seriously, how did I offend him? Han Yunxi smiled and shrugged. I don't know either. It was said that Long Fei Yi's thoughts were hard to fathom, but in fact, his son's thoughts were several times harder to fathom. Long Fei Yi patiently coaxed him, but no matter how he coaxed, Rui still cried. Helpless, Long Fei Yi could only return Rui to Han Yunxi. As soon as Rui was in Han Yunxi's arms, he immediately stopped crying. Maybe it's because you look too fierce and he's afraid of you. Smile more at him. Smile more obviously. After a while, he won't be afraid of you anymore. Han Yunxi smiled. When Long Fei Yi wasn't smiling, he was indeed fierce and serious. Long Fei Yi's mouth twitched, but he didn't say anything. Although he loved his son, he really couldn't smile exaggeratedly at him all day long. That night, Rui stayed with Han Yunxi and Long Fei Yi and slept with his parents. The little guy didn't know that there was a festival tonight. As usual, he was hungry after an hour and cried when he was hungry. Han Yunxi was very sleepy, but she had to get up. Long Fei Yi also couldn't sleep that night. The next night, Long Fei Yi let the nanny take Rui away. Rui wailed as soon as he was taken away from Han Yunxi. Han Yunxi's heart was about to break from crying, but she still let the nanny take him back. Long Fei Yi had no choice but to continue accompanying him. Granny Zhao and fourth young mistress Ren were in disbelief. Not to mention Long Fei Yi's noble status, even ordinary men wouldn't accompany him like this. In the middle of the night, when Long Fei Yi was woken up again, he asked, if it was a daughter, would she be more obedient? Probably. Han Yunxi was tired and answered casually, go sleep in the meeting tent. There's still a lot of work to do tomorrow. You're risking your life to accompany him. Of course, I'll do the same with you, Long Fei Yi said faintly. Long Fei Yi lay on his side beside Han Yunxi. He really wanted to wrap his arms around Han Yunxi's waist, but he didn't dare to touch her. He was afraid that he would hurt her during the confinement period and leave behind repercussions. Han Yunxi smiled and reached out to hug him. Lovers big and small, hugging left and right, how blissful. Long Fei Yi fell silent, then murmured, when Rui grows up and you're free, why don't you give me a little lover too? In his heart, Long Fei Yi still preferred daughters. Han Yunxi chuckled. This. I can't say for sure. It was still unknown whether Long Fei Yi favored his son or daughter, but it seemed that Long Fei Yi favored his wife over his son. After Rui stayed by his mother's side for 2 nights, Long Fei Yi had the nanny take Rui away on the 3rd night. Han Yunxi's confinement period passed day by day. One day, Long Fei Yi finally couldn't take it anymore and called Chu Shifeng over. Ask around and find out where Gu Beiyue and the rest are staying. Also, how's Gu doing? In the end, Long Fei Yi decided to tell Han Yunxi the truth regardless of whether Gu was willing or not. Once fourth young Miss Ren confirmed that Han Yunxi's confinement period was over and she could go out, he'd tell Han Yunxi everything. Right now, he didn't dare to hope for anything except that Gu could wait, so he could see Han Yunxi again. Yes. This subordinate will contact Su Donglin right away, Chu Shifeng said seriously. As soon as Chu Shifeng left, another urgent message arrived from Northernly. Again, it was Ning Chang's handwritten letter. The last time Long Feiyi had received Ning Chang's letter, it coincided with Rui Er's birth. Ning Chang's report had been delayed. Despite the delay, Long Fei had a clear idea of the situation. Ning Chang was originally planning to send out his troops at the end of spring, but now he changed his mind and wanted to send out troops at this critical juncture. He even asked for food supplies. Long Feiyi had long spread the news that Ning Chang was going to send out troops. He figured that plenty of people would come looking for him within the next 2 days. Long Fei opened the letter and glanced at it before breaking into a smile. It wasn't clear what Ning Chang had written in the letter, but it caught his eye. He didn't wait for the various generals to come looking for him, but came down of his own accord. Someone come, send orders to Bailey Yuanlong. Tell him to gather everyone and say that this crown prince wants to discuss the northernly battlefield with them. Originally, the people from the various military departments were hesitant. They were all waiting for someone to talk to His Highness about this matter and test His Highness' attitude. When they heard that His Highness wanted to discuss with them, everyone became excited. A few days later, the various generals gathered at the Yuning barracks. As soon as Long Feiyi arrived, everyone fell to their knees to pay their respects. 2 rows of people stood in the tent. One was made up of the various generals, while the other was made up of civil officials. There were old officials from both Tianning and Tianan who had been recruited because of their talents in governing the world. There were also a few retired strategists who had come of their own accord because of their admiration for Long Feiyi. Bailey Yuanlong stood at the head of the generals' ranks, while a strategist named He Wenqing stood at the head of the civil officials' ranks. After Long Feiyi sat down, he got straight to the point. Ning Chang's changed his mind and wants to send out troops. He wrote a letter asking for food supplies from this crown prince. Everyone, what do you think? Bailey Yuanlong was the first to step forward. To reply, Your Highness, this soldier believes that Ning Chang's actions have other motives. Long Feiyi arched a brow and asked, what motives? Ning Chang's thinking of betraying us. Bailey Yuanlong said seriously. Tianning snow disasters aren't over yet, and the plague is still rampant. Sending out troops now is simply seeking death. It's impossible for Ning Chang not to understand this logic. If Ning Chang wants food supplies, then he's definitely not planning a northern expedition. It's very likely that he's planning a difficult descent. At Bailey Yuanlong's words, the generals behind him began to talk amongst themselves. Many of the civil officials began to whisper to each other as well. Ning Chang really had no reason to send out troops now. He could just keep waiting and wait. As long as the plague and famine in Northernly continued for another month or 2, the Northern Dynasty's emperors would only have 2 paths to take. One was to surrender, the other was to commit suicide for the country. There was no longer any military strength left to contend with Ning Chang. Ning Chang didn't just sit back and enjoy the fruits of others' labor, but risked sending out troops instead. Setting aside the problem of climate, the plague alone was enough to wipe out Ning Chang's entire army. General Su of the Southern Generals also stood up. Your Highness, once Ning Chang's descent is difficult, he can just defend the 3-way monastery and declare himself king of Northernly. Chapter 1183. The Southern General's words weren't wrong at all. If Ning Ching went south to defend Three-Way Pass, he'd have enough troops and provisions to rule over the land. Silence reigned in the large tent. If Bailey Yuanlong hadn't brought it up, no one would have dared to bring it up. After all, Ning Ching represented the power of Western Qin's imperial clan. Ning Cheng's backer was Han Yunxi, the woman who'd just given birth to Long Feiye's son. Long Feiye swept his icy gaze across the crowd and asked, "What about the others? What do you think?" At first, no one dared to speak. Although a few of them didn't agree with Bailey Yuanlong and the Southern General's stance, they didn't think Ning Ching would rebel at a time like this. But they couldn't find any other reason to explain Ning Cheng's decision to send out his troops now. Long Fei laughed coldly. "What? Do you all have the same opinion as General Bailey?" Long Feiye's attitude towards Ning Ching was hard to fathom to begin with, so his laugh only made them feel even more uncertain. After some hesitation, Bailey Yuanlong said, "Your Highness, why don't we refute Ning Ching first and see what his stance is?" Long Feiye didn't speak, but tapped his fingers lightly on the table. He didn't reveal any of his thoughts. Bailey Yuanlong didn't dare to speak either. Just like that, everyone fell silent. It had to be said that Long Fei was very disappointed right now. All of his civil and military officials were going to defend his country with him in the future and leave behind a glorious stroke in the annals of Cloud Realm Continent's history. But all of them couldn't compare to a single Ning Ching. Long Feiye felt both disappointment and heartache. He tapped the table faster and faster with increasing force. In the silent tent, everyone's hearts sped up as they grew more and more nervous. No one knew what Long Fei meant, but they could all tell that he was about to lose his temper. At this time, the head of the civil officials, He Wenqing, stepped forward and respectfully bowed. "Your Highness, this commoner's humble opinion does not agree with the military's words." This He Wenqing was in his early 40s, but he looked like an old man in his 50s. His movements and speech were very slow, but he was a person with feelings and strategy. In the past, both Emperor Tianhui and Emperor Kongqing had sent people to invite him to come out of seclusion multiple times, but all their attempts ended in failure. Long Feiye originally wanted to invite He Wenqing, but he was too busy and delayed the matter until after the founding of the country. Who knew that a month ago, He Wenqing had volunteered to join the army? What do you think? Let's hear it. Long Feiye was still knocking on the table. He Wenqing said seriously, "This commoner thinks that Great General Ning is sending troops to ask for food, not to attack the Northern Dynasty's emperors, but to send troops to relieve the disaster." According to this commoner's understanding, the snowstorm in the northern part of Northern Li is extremely serious. Famine and pestilence are rampant, leaving many villages littered with corpses. Meanwhile, the Northern Dynasty's emperors have yet to do anything. If this drags on for another month, even if the Northern Dynasty's emperors have the heart to help, they won't have the strength to do so. At this, Long Feiye's hands finally stopped moving. Everyone exhaled in relief as they focused on He Wenqing's words. Military strategists, those who fight for the sake of war, are considered inferior. Those who fight without war are considered superior. Great General Ning is the latter. As soon as He Wenqing finished speaking, the crowd fell silent. These words were a vicious slap to the faces of Bailey Yuanlong and the military faction. Those who don't care about the lives of innocents and start a war for the sake of war are considered inferior. This was referring to Bailey Yuanlong and the military faction. Those who start a war for the sake of peace are considered superior. This was referring to Ning Ching. Ning Ching didn't ask for food to fight a war, but to save people. With the provisions of the Northern Dynasty's emperors, no matter what Ning Ching did in the Northernly battlefield, the Northern Dynasty's emperors wouldn't be able to turn defeat into victory. Ning Ching would definitely win the hearts of the people if he sent troops to help the people now. Ning Qing could win without fighting. The situation in Northernly wasn't just about the Northernly battlefield, Ning Qing, and Long Fei Yi. If Ning Qing waited until the plague was rampant before sending troops, that would be a ruthless extermination. If he sent troops to help the people now, the people of Northernly would remember Ning Chang's kindness and Long Fei Yi's benevolence. One had to know that Northernly was a people who lived on horseback and were very brave. It wouldn't be easy to subdue the people there and ensure stability in the future. Long Fei Yi was about to proclaim himself emperor. He would rule over all of Cloud Realm, and all of its people would be his subjects. Did Bailey Yuanlong and the military faction want Long Fei Yi to leave a trail of corpses in Northernly before he claimed the throne? If that was the case, Long Fei Yi would lose his title of ruler before he even ascended the throne. He might even be called a tyrant. Ning Qing had thought of all this for him. But Bailey Yuanlong and the southern military faction who had followed him for many years had completely overlooked this point. Long Fei Yi looked up at Bailey Yuanlong and the southern military faction and said angrily, "Fighting for the sake of war isn't just subservient, it's brutal." As Long Fei Yi reprimanded, he casually tossed Ning Chang's handwritten letter at Bailey Yuanlong's face. "Take a look for yourself." Bailey Yuanlong hurriedly picked up the letter, his face turning red after reading it. Ning Qing had only said one thing in the letter. He said that if they had to wait until after the plague, he would resign from his post as the great general of the Northern Punitive Expedition. He would never mobilize troops in the aftermath of the disaster in this lifetime. Bailey Yuanlong immediately fell to his knees, followed by a group of people behind him. "Your Highness, this general knows his wrongs." This general's worries were lacking in consideration. "I beg your Highness to forgive this general for the sake of this general's sincerity." Long Fei Yi looked at Bailey Yuanlong, his deep eyes filled with disappointment. The southern military faction had always thought they had ulterior motives, but Bailey Yuanlong was the one who had followed him for the longest time. The former Bailey general wasn't like this at all. He would never treat the Bailey clan unfairly in the future. Why was Bailey Yuanlong so anxious to eliminate dissidents for the sake of his family's interests? He didn't even understand the principle of the people are the most important, and the state is the least important. At this time, He Wenqing added, "Your Highness, in this commoner's humble opinion, Your Highness not only needs to send Ning Qing provisions, but also medicinal ingredients. If necessary, you can ask for Medical City's help. Once the weather warms, the plague will spread even faster. At that time, southern Northernly will also be in danger. Medical City has already made preparations." Long Fei Yi said indifferently, "Bailey Yuanlong, I'll leave the matter of provisions to you. Make up for your mistakes with merits." This could be considered the last chance Long Fei Yi was giving the old general. If Bailey Yuanlong continued to disappoint, Long Fei Yi would probably make an example out of him before he became emperor. "Thank you for your Highness' grace." Bailey Yuanlong repeatedly kowtowed. Many people present wanted to show concern for Han Yunqi's child, but unfortunately, once Long Fei Yi got angry, no one dared to say anything for fear of making more mistakes. Long Fei Yi didn't hide the situation in Northernly from Han Yunqi and told her the truth. Han Yunqi admired Ning Cheng's attitude, but she didn't say anything. She said seriously, "Long Fei Yi, this is an opportunity. Leave the allocation of medicinal ingredients and physicians to Gu Beiyue. In the future." Han Yunqi stopped here and patted her head. No, Gu Beiyue is too busy. Leave it to Vice Academy head Shen." Long Fei Yi and she both had the idea of taking medical and medicine cities under the jurisdiction of the imperial court. The plague in Northernly not only required large amounts of medicinal ingredients, but also many physicians. If they could use this opportunity to have Gu Beiyue manage the allocation of medicinal ingredients and physicians, as well as provide financial support, there would be less resistance to establishing a separate medical department to govern the medical community in the future. This matter concerned the power of many families in Medical City, as well as the great aristocratic families in Medicine City. If not for Gu Beiyue, it would be difficult to handle. However, Gu Beiyue had to help Gu prepare the medicine. Long Fei remained silent without a word. Seventh young master should be returning to Medical City in about 10 days, right? Han Yunxi had been keeping track of the time. Su Donglin's letter had stated very clearly that Gu had already found the medicinal ingredients and was on his way back. That was the last ingredient. As long as it was delivered, Gu Beiyue would be able to concoct the antidote according to their plans. As long as the medicinal ingredients were found, Han Yunxi was very confident in curing Gu. How about this? Let fourth young Miss Ren go back to assist Vice Academy head Shin. This plague won't end without a year and a half. Once Gu recovers, we'll have him and Gu Beiyue go to Northernly together. Han Yunxi said seriously. I'll be emerging from closed-door cultivation in a few days. Have fourth young Miss Ren go back. Long Fei Yi replied without hesitation, all right. I'll have Chu Shifeng make the arrangements later. Han Yunxi rejoiced. Everyone said that confinement was boring, but she didn't feel it at first. Instead, she felt tired. But in the last few days, she couldn't help but want to go outside and breathe in the cold air. She couldn't wait to get involved in military and government affairs. Of course, she couldn't wait to run to Medical City and see Gu Beiyue concoct the antidote for Xiao Qi's undying body with her own eyes. Invite fourth young Miss Ren over later. I need to talk to her about setting up a medical team to go to Northernly, Han Yunxi said seriously. All right, Long Fei Yi nodded again. Long Fei Yi walked out of the tent just as Chu Shifeng came to report. Your Highness, seventh young master and Dr. Beiyue are at the back of the mountain. Long Fei Yi gave a start before waving a hand to dismiss him. Long Fei Yi didn't go to the back of the mountain right away. Even as a clear-headed man, he didn't understand why he didn't go or what he was afraid of. Not long after fourth young Miss Ren left, two guests arrived at rear camp. They were none other than Ning Jing and Tang Li. The shadow guards lying in ambush discovered them before they even reached the tent. They immediately came to report to Long Fei Yi. Long Fei Yi went to greet them personally, but suddenly landed in front of the carriage, frightening the horse and driver. Fortunately, the driver pulled on the reins in time to stop the carriage. As soon as Ning Jing lifted the curtains, Tang Li jumped out of the carriage and rushed in front of Long Fei Yi, spreading his arms to fend him off. He didn't recognize Long Fei Yi anymore, but assumed Long Fei Yi was a bad guy blocking his way. Ning Jing had mentioned in her letters to Han Yunxi that Tang Li had changed. He no longer ignored her, but protected and relied on her. Long Fei Yi knew this, but he still felt his heart ache at the sight of Tang Li's hostility. Ning Jing panicked. Li, that's your big brother. Ning Jing was about to jump off the carriage when Tang Li immediately ran back and reached out to carry her. Chapter 1184. Long Fei Yi watched in silence as Tang Li carried Ning Jing out of the carriage. He did not look at Tang Li's face, but only at his back and actions. Long Fei Yi almost thought that Tang Li was pretending to be stupid. Even if he was stupid, he was still like a slave to his wife in front of Ning Jing. After Ning Jing steadied herself, she took Tang Li's hand and said seriously, "That's His Highness, your brother. He's not hostile to us." Tang Li turned around and glanced at Long Fei Yi. He did not react much, nor did he say anything. However, it was obvious that he was not hostile anymore. Although he did not speak and spoke to Ning Jing, he could understand Ning Jing's meaning. This meant that he was willing to listen to Ning Jing. This was a good sign. Let's go back, Long Fei Yi said lightly. Ning Jing did not take the carriage again. Instead, she pulled Tang Li and Long Fei Yi to walk back together. She held Tang Li's arm and let Tang Li walk beside Long Fei Yi. Tang Li was not afraid. He just looked straight ahead with an expressionless face and kept walking forward. They did not speak along the way. Long Fei Yi deliberately stopped. Ning Jing noticed, but Tang Li still kept walking forward. It was not that Tang Li could not see or hear. He could sense it, but he did not care. It did not matter. Ning Jing turned around and was about to speak when Long Fei Yi raised his hand to stop her. He followed behind Ning Jing and Tang Li as they slowly walked back to the military camp. He was not deceiving himself. It was just that looking at Tang Li's familiar back could make his heavy heart relax a little. Long Fei Yi's attention was all on Tang Li. However, when Ning Jing and Tang Li appeared in front of Han Yunxi, the first thing that Han Yunxi saw was Ning Jing. To be exact, she saw Ning Jing's teeth. Logically, Han Yunxi's tent was not for men to enter as they pleased. However, Tang Li was an exception. Han Yunxi was wearing custom-made clothes. They were loose but not undignified. She sat on the chaise lounge and leaned against it. Ning Jing and Tang Li sat in front of her. She asked Ning Jing about her teeth in a serious manner. Go back for another checkup in 3 months and there won't be any major problems, Ning Jing replied honestly. Han Yunxi looked left and right and suddenly smiled. Ning Jing, smile. Ning Jing was serious at first. However, when she saw Han Yunxi smile, she could not help but laugh, revealing a mouthful of beautiful teeth. Han Yunxi became serious. You're beautiful again. Really? Ning Jing was silent for a long time. When she saw that Han Yunxi's smile did not fade, she also smiled and said confidently, yes, I'm beautiful again. I won't wear men's clothes anymore. Tang Li was in a daze. Ning Jing became stronger. At this time, Granny Zhao carried Rui over. Tang Li did not react at all. On the other hand, Ning Jing looked at him and liked him very much. However, she did not dare to say that she wanted to carry him. Shouldn't I call her auntie? Han Yunxi asked suspiciously. Granny Zhao did not dare to make a sound. Tang Li was His Highness' cousin and Ning Jing was his sister-in-law. In terms of seniority, the little master should indeed call them uncle and auntie. However, in terms of status, that was not necessary. Han Yunxi was not so polite. She smiled and said, come, let auntie carry you. Long Fei Yi sat at the tea table not far away. He watched without making a sound. Ning Jing carefully took Rui and hugged him. Unexpectedly, Rui was not afraid of strangers. He did not cry and even grinned. Ning Jing was excited. Look, he's smiling. He's smiling. He's really smiling. The little master is bold and not afraid of strangers, Granny Zhao said with a smile. Han Yunxi seemed to have thought of something. She turned to Long Fei Yi and saw that Long Fei Yi was staring at his precious son. Granny Zhao, who was laughing, did not realize that she had said something wrong. Ning Jing hugged him for a while and said, little Tang Tang is older than him by a year. She's his older sister. Ning Jing, why don't you stay here and let Madame Tang send little Tang Tang over? Han Yunxi suggested. Ning Jing smiled and did not answer. Han Yunxi did not know what she was planning, so she did not say much. Han Yunxi moved closer and stared at Tang Li, Tang Li was still indifferent and treated her like air. Han Yunxi did not say anything and just stared at Tang Li. In fact, Ning Jing would write to her every time Tang Li changed. She was very clear about Tang Li's situation. Tang Li's reaction to Ning Jing's words was a good sign. Perhaps, as time passed, Tang Li would react to Long Fei Yi, her, and even more familiar people, and he would gradually recover. Han Yunxi personally went to get the pear blossom teardrop rain. In the late stages of her pregnancy, she put away all the accessories and hidden weapons on her body. Only the bracelet Long Fei Yi gave her was left. Although the pear blossom teardrop rain was given by Long Fei Yi, it was designed by Long Fei Yi, who asked Tang Li to design it. Han Yunxi deliberately took away a few parts of the pear blossom teardrop rain and handed it to Tang Li. Before she could speak, Tang Li's originally empty eyes fell on the pear blossom teardrop rain. This slight change made everyone nervous. Ning Jing was the most excited. Just as she was about to speak, Han Yunxi signaled her not to be anxious with a look. Tang Li took the pear blossom teardrop rain and glanced at it. He actually opened his mouth and said, "It's broken." "It's broken." She had not heard this voice for a long time. For the past few months, Tang Li had not said anything other than repeating the sentence, "I want to be quiet, I want to be quiet." "How is it broken?" "Tang Li, tell me, how is it broken?" Ning Jing choked. Tang Li did not answer. Instead, he took the pear blossom teardrop rain apart and looked at it before saying, "It's missing 2 wires." The 2 parts that Han Yunxi casually took away were 2 special wires. Tang Li was dumbfounded. No one else could recognize it, but he could recognize and see through the hidden weapons he made himself. Ning Jing looked at Han Yunxi excitedly. At this moment, Han Yunxi was also excited. Even Long Fei Yi, who was sitting at the side, walked over quietly. Ning Jing asked carefully, "Then, can it be fixed?" "Yes." Tang Li was very sure. His dumbfounded expression turned serious. "How do you fix it?" Long Fei Yi interrupted. Tang Li did not answer. Ning Jing was anxious and asked again, "Ali, how do you fix it?" Tang Li did not answer. Instead, he fiddled with the pear blossom teardrop rain. Long Fei Yi wanted to ask more, but Han Yunxi stopped him and said in a low voice, "How about this? Have the Tang clan send over all the hidden weapons that Tang Li personally made." Many people who suffered mental setbacks would forget everything and go crazy, but they wouldn't forget their professional skills. At the very least, they wouldn't reject them. Perhaps this would be a faster way to wake him up than Ning Jing alone. "All right." Long Fei Yi immediately went out to arrange things. He had Chu Shifeng give orders to the Tang clan while he found a pile of hidden weapons from somewhere. All of them were personally designed and made by Tang Li himself. Han Yunxi had never seen many of them before. When they piled up in front of Tang Li, they could clearly see the light in his eyes. Ning Jing was both agitated and sad. She teased herself, so in his heart, "My daughter and I aren't even worth as much as this pile of scrap metal. Try harder and wake him up. Ask him yourself if this pile of scrap metal is more important, or you and your daughter." Han Yunxi smiled. "As long as he wakes up, it's fine even if my daughter and I aren't important." Ning Jing looked back at Han Yunxi. Afraid that Han Yunxi wouldn't believe her, she added, "It's true. I don't mind." Han Yunxi wanted to hug Ning Jing, but in the end she only patted her on the shoulder. She knew that Ning Jing was different from Mu Ling. Ning Jing only needed a pat on the shoulder to pull herself together, while Mu Ling needed someone to hug her and cry her heart out. Han Yunxi wanted to ask Ning Jing if she should let Mu Ling and Lady Tang send little Tang Tang over, but Ning Jing didn't react when she mentioned the girl's name, so she couldn't bring it up again. If little Tang Tang was here, then Lady Tang would definitely come as well. It wasn't a big deal if Lady Tang came, but what about the rest of the Tang clan? Would Ning Jing be able to stay quietly by Tang Li's side then? Long Fei Yi ordered people to set up a small tent for Tang Li and Ning Jing in a secluded area behind rear camp. Tang Li and Ning Jing stayed there just like that. Tang Li was obsessed with the hidden weapons, dismantling and assembling them over and over again. Ning Jing didn't know anything about hidden weapons, so she asked some amateur questions at the beginning. Who knew that Tang Li would actually take the initiative to teach her how to design hidden weapons? Within a few days, Tang Li became more talkative. Unfortunately, he was only willing to talk to Ning Jing. Long Fei Yi came by a few times to ask about him, but Tang Li ignored him. When Ning Jing talked to him about hidden weapons, she would often suddenly ask him, "Ollie, do you know who I am?" Tang Li shook his head. He didn't know that the woman in front of him was the Jing Jing that he often muttered to himself, and he didn't know that the woman in front of him was his wife. Ning Jing would always tell him, "I am Jing Jing, Ning Jing." Tang Li would nod every time, but that was it. The next time she asked, he still didn't know anything. No matter what Tang Li said, Ning Jing was calm and gentle as always. However, she felt terrible behind her back. In the past, she could only hide and suffer. Now that she was in the military camp, she would go to Han Yunxi whenever she felt bad. She didn't complain or cry. She just chatted with Han Yunxi and teased little Rui. Her mood soon improved. With Ning Jing, a woman who had been through confinement, accompanying her, Han Yunxi suddenly felt that her confinement days weren't so boring. Time even seemed to pass faster. During the day, when Ning Jing was around, Long Fei Yi rarely went to accompany Han Yunxi and little Rui. He was busy paying attention to the epidemic in Northern Li and the formation of the medical team. In the end, he couldn't resist going to the mountain behind rear camp alone. Chu Shifeng had long asked for the location of Gu Beiyue's group, so Long Fei Yi easily found the little house at the top of the mountain. It was currently evening. Spring was full of grass and flowers in the woods. Even under the setting sun, the scene was full of vitality. But Long Fei Yi saw a lifeless scene from a distance. Gu was sitting alone by the door, his entire body curled up in his black robes. Only his head was sticking out. His head was bowed, shrouded in the afterglow of the setting sun like a man in his twilight years. Long Fei Yi stood there for a long time, neither leaving nor approaching. Chapter 1185. Long Fei Yi stood by the side until the sky fell and the whole world darkened, but Gu didn't move at all. Rather than saying that he was an old man, it was better to say that he was a dead thing. Long Fei Yi finally walked over, but even when he stood in front of Gu still didn't notice him and buried his head in his black robe. Even though he was so close, Long Fei Yi still couldn't see his face. On the other hand, Gu Beiyue, who was in the room, sensed someone coming over. He came out and wasn't surprised to see Long Fei Yi. He knew that Long Fei Yi would come over sooner or later. "What's wrong with him?" Long Fei Yi asked. Gu Beiyue glanced at Gu, his eyes full of tenderness and love, as if he was looking at a child. He said, "He should be asleep, right? He often sleeps for 1 or 2 days in the past month." Long Fei immediately knitted his brows, while Gu Beiyue smiled helplessly. "I'm terrified. Perhaps he'll fall asleep and never wake up again. To him, that'll be the end of his torture." "Gu, wake up!" Long Fei Yi suddenly shouted fiercely. Unfortunately, Gu didn't move. Gu Beiwe didn't say anything and went back into the room to continue making medicine. He knew that Gu could disappear at any time and turn into a thorny tree. But he still hadn't given up. Long Feiyi followed him in and saw that the room was full of medicinal herbs and Gu Beiwe's notes. Long Feiyi pinched his brows and found a place to sit down. He asked, "Is there any progress with Mulinger?" Long Feiyi knew that Mulinger had gone to Medical City. Han Yunxi didn't, and neither did Gu. It should be hopeless. A few days ago, Linger left Medical City to look for medicine. There's been no news of her for more than 10 days. Gu Beiwe looked rational, but he was the most irrational of them all. He knew that everything he was doing was futile, but he still worked day and night to make medicine. Like a child, he hoped for a miracle. Long Feiyi fell silent. Gu Beiwe was immersed in his experiments as well. After a long time, Long Feiyi said, "In 4 days, Ruier will be 1 month old. I'm planning to bring Yunxi and Ruier over here." Gu Beiwe's hand stiffened as he looked back. "Your Highness, will there be enough time?" That was what Long Fei wanted to ask the most. "Was it in time, Your Highness? We've already hidden it for so long. Don't make the princess sad. The little master's 1-month birthday is a joyous occasion, so we can't treat him unfairly," Gu Beiwe said. Long Feiyi leaned against the wall and murmured, "It's too late. Han Yunxi won't be at ease for the rest of her life." Gu Beiwe was speechless. Unconsciously, he stopped what he was doing and sat down as well. The two of them fell into silence, even more silent than Gu outside the door. At the same time, Han Yunxi was still clueless about everything in the main tent of rear camp. Ning Jing had accompanied Han Yunxi for an entire day. After little Ruier was taken away, only the two of them were left in the tent. Ning Jing finally spoke up. "Princess, I want to bring Tangli back to the Tang clan." Han Yunxi had a complicated look in her eyes. It seemed that Ning Jing had originally planned to bring Tangli back to the Tang clan. She was just passing by the military camp to see them. Han Yunxi nodded and didn't say much. Ning Jing smiled. "I miss my daughter. If we don't go back now, she'll really not acknowledge her parents. Tangli is the only son of the Tang clan and also the clan master. I can't bully him and not let him go back," Ning Jing added. "I understand," Han Yunxi replied. Tang Zijin and the entire Tang clan elder council are busy preparing for the construction of the imperial palace. They're all with Tianan and not the Tang clan. It's time for you to go back now. Ning Jing was silent for a long time before she said seriously, "Princess, I'll tell you one thing. No matter how difficult this trip is, I'll stay here until Tangli recovers." "What about after Tangli recovers?" Ning Jing clearly didn't finish her sentence, and the key point was in the second half of her sentence. Han Yunxi waited for a long time. Ning Jing seemed to want to say something, but she just smiled and said, "Okay, I'm going to pack. I'll leave early tomorrow morning." Han Yunxi had 1,000 words to say, but they were all in her heart. She secretly said in her heart, "Ning Jing, don't worry. With me here, I won't let the Tang clan owe you anything." Ning Jing had already risen to her feet when Han Yunxi muttered to herself, "If you guys go back, that girl Linger should be here by now." She thought that when Ling came, she would definitely ask about Gu's whereabouts. Ning Jing stopped and said suspiciously, "Ling left the Tang clan a long time ago. She was invited by Gu Beiwe to help out at Medical City." Han Yunxi, who was a little tired, was shocked. Medical City. Gu Beiwe. It's been a month, right? When she left the Tang clan, she sent me a letter saying that she was going to Medical City to help Dr. Gu prepare medicine, Ning Jing explained. Han Yunxi nervously grabbed Ning Jing's hand. What medicine? Who wants to use it? Gu Beiyue had been helping Gu find medicine to prepare medicine. Moreover, Su Donglin's letter didn't mention Mu Ling at all. Han Yunxi didn't have time to think about it, but she already felt that this matter wasn't simple. This matter must have something to do with Gu. Why did Gu Beiyue need Mu Ling's help? Didn't things go smoothly between Gu Beiyue and Gu? At this time, according to Su Donglin's message, Gu should have delivered the medicine. He and Gu Beiyue should be preparing the final antidote. Ning Jing didn't know anything about the situation and just casually mentioned it. She didn't expect Han Yunxi to be so agitated. She also realized that something was wrong. Princess, what's wrong? Tell me quickly. What medicine is Mu Ling going to prepare for Gu Beiyue? Who is it for? Han Yunxi didn't realize that her hands were trembling. However, Ning Jing found out. Ning Jing couldn't imagine how big of a deal this was to make Han Yunxi so scared before she understood the situation. Tell me. Han Yunxi shouted anxiously. If Gu Beiyue asked Mu Ling for help because of Gu, it meant that the letter from Medical City was a lie. It meant that Long Feiyi, Gu Beiyue, and Gu were all lying to her in the past few months after she left Medical City and gave birth to Rui. Why did they lie to her? If they couldn't find the medicine, then so be it. Wasn't Gu fine all along? The reason why they were looking for the medicine was to prepare for the eventuality. If they couldn't find the medicine, there was no need to hide it from her. Could it be that something happened to Gu? How serious was the matter that the three of them had to work together to deceive her? Han Yunxi's heart and mind were in a mess. She didn't dare to think further. The uneasiness in her heart grew bigger and bigger, almost swallowing her rationality. Ning Jing was frightened by her and couldn't speak for a long time. Outside, Granny Zhao heard the noise inside and hurried over. Princess, what's wrong? Only then did Han Yunxi recover her wits and realize the situation she was in. However, she couldn't calm down. She still held Ning Jing's hand and asked seriously, Ning Jing, why did Ling go to Medical City? Tell me everything you know, will you? Ning Jing nodded and explained, I don't know much. Ling told me that Dr. Gu invited her to Medical City to help with the prescription and asked her to hurry over as soon as possible. She said that Dr. Gu's patient is very dangerous. At this point, Han Yunxi suddenly let go of Ning Jing's hand and fell onto the warm couch. Ling originally wanted to wait for us to return before she left, but Dr. Gu said that if the medicine isn't prepared in a month or two, the patient won't live. When Ning Jing finished speaking, Han Yunxi's face turned completely pale. She seemed to have lost all her strength in an instant. She sat weakly on the warm couch and stared blankly at Ning Jing. Suddenly, tears filled her eyes and she cried, Xiao Qi. It's Xiao Qi. It's Xiao Qi. Wasn't it clear enough? Long Feiyi and the other two were lying to her. They were all lying to her. The letters from Medical City were all fake. Liars. They're all liars. Han Yunxi's tears fell like rain. She didn't even bother to put on her shoes and stepped off the couch in her socks. Where's Long Feiyi? I want to see Long Feiyi. Where's Long Feiyi? She rushed directly to the main tent. Ning Jing and Xiao Mama hadn't recovered from their shock. When they chased after her, Han Yunxi had already stepped into the snow. Long Feiyi. Come out. Come out. Liars, you're all liars. You're lying to me again and again. You're lying to me again and again. Why are you lying to me? The shadow guard and the servants in the rear camp chased after her. Zhao Mama and Ning Jing hurriedly came to pull her back. After all, the princess still had a few more days to officially finish her confinement. She couldn't come out. Not to mention someone who was still in confinement, even a normal person would freeze if they stepped in the snow with only a pair of socks. Moreover, the temperature outside was especially low at night. The north wind was very cold. How could she bear this? Zhao Mama had no idea what was going on. She was so anxious that she was about to cry. She took a thick fox fur cloak and wrapped it around the princess. She hugged her tightly. "Princess, no matter what happened, you must listen to this old servant's advice. Quickly go back." Ning Jing took a pair of cotton shoes and squatted in the snow to help Han Yunxi put them on. The servant girls didn't care if they would offend her and all came to help. They held down Han Yunxi's hands and feet, afraid that she would move or struggle. Han Yunxi didn't move. She didn't have the strength to move. Her tears were like a broken dam, flowing uncontrollably. "I want to see Long Fei Yi. I want to see Long Fei Yi. I want to see Shao Qi. I want to see him. They can't do this. I want to see them. They can't lie to me like this, they can't. They think I'm a fool. I'm a fool. Ning Jing, I'm a fool. Sob sob, they're liars, I'm a fool. Ning Jing, did you know? Gu Beiyue's patient is Shao Qi, did you know? If he had any other choice, Gu Beiyue would never ask Ling for help, he wouldn't. Han Yunxi cried until her insides were cut to pieces. Ning Jing stood rooted to the spot. She never expected things to turn out like this. Where's Mu Ling er? Does Mu Ling know that Gu Beiyue's patient is her Qi brother? A group of servant girls surrounded Han Yunxi. Chu Shifeng had just returned from the outside and saw everyone gathered outside the tent. He hastily went over to ask what was going on, but no one was clear on what had happened. All they knew was that the princess wanted to see His Highness and Gu Qishao. Chu Shifeng was stunned by the news. He asked the person beside him, "Then what about His Highness?" "His Highness." You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.